Hey, Ron, can we begin the housekeeping comments, please?
Welcome and thank you for participating in today's meeting for the South Coast Air Quality Management District. If attending in person, please do not connect to Zoom or teleconference while in the room. To prevent disruptions, please silence all devices. All participants on Zoom, except for board members and South Coast AQMD staff, will be placed on mute. You will not be able to mute or unmute your line manually. After each item, public comment will be taken. If you are participating in person and wish to comment, please use the iPads which are located in the lobby if the meeting is in the auditorium. For meetings in other locations, please complete a blue speaker card and provide the card to a South Coast AQMD employee. Information on how to participate in the meeting in Spanish using a telephone will be provided at the end of these housekeeping remarks. Speakers may be limited to a total of 3 minutes or less for all items on the agenda. The amount of time to comment may be shortened to ensure all speakers can be heard. A countdown timer will be displayed on the screen for each public comment. If interpretation is needed, more time will be allotted. For questions or issues related to making public comment, please call the public advisor at 909-396-3247. That's 909-396-3247. In terms of decorum, if this meeting is taking place in the auditorium, no food or beverages are allowed in the auditorium. In accordance with state and local public health department guidelines, people may choose to wear a mask based on personal preference while in South Coast AQMD facilities. Please adhere to the speaker time limit and treat others with courtesy, civility, and respect. Failure to do so can result in your mic being muted or you being removed from the meeting. Lastly, be aware that this meeting is being recorded. By participating, you agree to authorize recording of audio and visual content presented during the live event and consent to subsequent use of the recording in the public domain by South Coast AQMD.
Buenos días. Gracias por participar en nuestra reunión híbrida del directorio de South Coast AQMD. Tenemos 3 formatos de participación: en persona, Zoom y conferencia telefónica. Los asistentes en persona no deben conectarse a la aplicación Zoom ni a la conferencia telefónica mientras estén en el auditorio. Por favor, silencie sus dispositivos de comunicación para evitar interrupciones durante la reunión. Todos los participantes en Zoom, excepto los miembros del directorio y el personal de South Coast AQMD, serán puestos en silencio. Usted no podrá silenciar o activar su línea manualmente. Esta reunión se está traduciendo al español. Para ver o escuchar esta reunión en el idioma de su preferencia, haga clic en el globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla denominado Interpretación. A partir de ahí, seleccione el idioma que prefiera. Después de seleccionar su idioma, si escucha ambos idiomas al mismo tiempo, haga clic en el Mute Original Audio. Para los participantes por conferencia telefónica, si desean escuchar la reunión en español, por favor llamen al 669-900-6833 e introduzca el número de identificación 932-09-55-9643. Esta información también está publicada en el calendario electrónico. Después de cada punto de la agenda, el presidente del directorio anunciará el periodo de comentarios públicos. Al hacer su comentario, por favor trate de mantener una cadencia de habla para ayudar a nuestros intérpretes a traducir simultáneamente. Los participantes en persona, por favor utilicen un iPad en la zona del vestíbulo para presentar su solicitud de comentario público. Su nombre será llamado cuando sea su turno para hablar. Para los que están en Zoom, por favor hagan clic en el botón Raise Hand si quieren hacer un comentario público. Para los participantes por conferencia telefónica, pueden marcar *9 para indicar que desean hacer comentarios. Su nombre o parte de su número de teléfono será llamado cuando sea su turno de comentar y automáticamente se abrirá la línea. Los comentarios públicos estarán limitados a un total de 3 minutos durante las partes de la agenda que se denominan calendario de consentimiento y calendario del directorio. A la vez, 3 minutos o menos para los demás puntos de la agenda. Con el fin de que todos tengan la oportunidad de ser escuchados, el presidente puede establecer un tiempo más corto. En la pantalla se mostrará un reloj atrás de cada comentario del público. Si necesita interpretación, se asignará más tiempo. Si tiene preguntas sobre comentarios públicos, por favor llame a la Secretaría del Directorio al 909-396-2500. Tenga en cuenta que puede colgar o abandonar la reunión de Zoom en cualquier momento. Se recomienda el uso de mascarillas, pero no es obligatorio para los participantes en persona. No se permite la entrada de alimentos o bebidas en el auditorio. Por favor, respete el límite de tiempo para hablar y trate a los demás con cortesía, civismo y respeto. Si no lo hace, su micrófono puede ser silenciado o usted puede ser retirado de la reunión. Por último, tenga en cuenta que esta reunión está siendo grabada. Al participar en esta reunión organizada por South Coast AQMD, usted está de acuerdo en autorizar la grabación de los contenidos audiovisuales presentados durante el evento en vivo y consiente el uso posterior de la grabación en el dominio público por parte de South Coast AQMD.
All right, thank you. Welcome, everybody, to the December 1st board meeting. We're going to be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Board Member Padilla Campos.
Please stand. Thank you. We'll put our right hand over our heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
All right, can we get a roll call, please?
Mayor Locke Dawson. Mayor Locke Dawson.
Here.
Supervisor Doe. Supervisor Doe is absent. Supervisor Hagman.
Hagman here.
Board Member Krakoff. Mayor McCowan.
Here.
Supervisor Mitchell.
Present.
Board Member Padilla Campos.
Here.
Supervisor Perez.
Here.
Councilmember Rahman. Councilmember Rahman is absent. Councilmember Rodriguez. Councilmember Rodriguez is absent. Councilmember Solache.
Present.
Vice Chair Caciotti.
Here.
And Chair Delgado.
And I'm here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any board member opening comments? Vice Chair?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few photos. Paul's getting those ready. First photo was yesterday. I was out at the ports, Long Beach ports, and we were with Matson. I want to thank the Pacific Merchant Shipping Association, Tom Jelinek, and others for hosting us for a short tour of a 55-acre terminal. Really they do a lot of work from 1880s till now with the state of Hawaii. On the right, we were down in a few weeks ago, Mayor McCowan and I at Steris. It's a sterilization facility as we look at Rule 1405 today. There's a mayor, myself, and some consultants. Next, Paul, please. On the left again, this was the ports. They're showing us some of their all-electric yard trucks. They've got think 40 or 50 or so, and they're finally started implementing part of it. It's kind of still a demonstration project. It's going okay. Those were actually bought from Mexico. They've dealt with Mexico purchasing diesel. Now they're purchasing some electric modified trucks. On the right is a large piece of cargo handling equipment, discussing if we're able to convert that from diesel to battery powered or hydrogen fuel cell. Next. On the left, this was part of our great staff out there in Rialto about 3 or 4 weeks ago. We were having a public outreach meeting at the high school. I was out there too. Checked the railroad yards first and went to the meeting. And it was a great discussion on our potential MOU. On the right, myself, that was a meeting a few nights ago with BizFed. And what's interesting, in the middle is a mayor, and the left is from Monterey Park. Henry Lowe. Next to me is Thomas Wong, also council member in Monterey Park. Gentleman second from the left, Larry Chung, is the vice president of governmental affairs at Edison. What's interesting, I talked to Larry and he said back in about 2004 or 5, he was actually a summer intern at AQMD. Great memories over here. So you never know where our summer interns are going to go. Next. And this was again you see Wayne standing there, a couple of our staff, myself, with members of the public, discussing issues with the railroads and MOU. Next. This was at a Boy Scout meeting last week, Monday night, one of our scout troops in South Pasadena. Of course, they wanted to talk about citizenship and environmental stewardship. And we, again, brought one of our electric leaf blowers and we're demonstrating with the scouts. They had a great time. Next. On the left, it's great. Finally, we're getting another vehicle that's all electric. This is the Bright Drop vehicle, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of General Motors. It's got a range of 250 miles. And here's one of our employees, Carl Thompson, looking to see if some of our monitoring equipment can fit. It has a 250-mile range. So we're trying to find that vehicle that can actually check out all of our monitors from the eastern Riverside County all the way up to Santa Clarita and in between. Next. That's it. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, staff. Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you for being out in the community. Any other board member comments?
Madam Chair, just to acknowledge that we see our brothers and sisters from Teamsters here today, just acknowledge your presence. And it's always good to have an audience here and as we dialogue issues at AQMD. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Appreciate that. Mayor Lock-Dawson?
Hi, yes, thanks. I just want to, a note of celebration for the city of Riverside. This week, and it's just kind of ties everything together here on what we do and what we're doing in our region. But our city council voted unanimously to finalize an agreement with the all-electric autonomous shuttle company, Omeo, to move its international headquarters from New Zealand to Riverside. So they're setting up. It's a big deal, yeah. And they chose Riverside in part because we're home to CARB, and they wanted to be close to CARB. So I think this is something that I've long wanted to see within the city of Riverside, is to build out our ecosystem of clean and green tech and support. And also they're going to be working with UCR and CSERT. So wonderful things. I'm just very excited about it, and stay tuned. And if anybody has been on one of these autonomous shuttles, they have them in Korea. I have ridden on them there. You may have, Supervisor Hagman. And but now Omeo's international headquarters and their production facilities are in Riverside. So it's wonderful.
That's exciting. Thank you for sharing. Supervisor?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and colleagues. First and foremost, let me just state that I'm fortunate to be here this morning. I was on my way actually to go see the doctor in LA, but I figured I got about maybe 30 to 45 minutes to stop in, at least to be part of the first part of the meeting this morning. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm very happy to see our Teamsters are here. I know that Teamsters have reached out to my office, have reached out to me that want to sit down with me and talk. And so I look forward to that conversation. I don't think we have a date scheduled yet, but know that I am interested in sitting down and talking and figuring things out with you all. And just secondly, I live in a district, in an area in which it's growing. Folks are moving towards the east. Right, we're talking about East Riverside County. We're talking about the Coachella Valley. So what does that mean? That means infrastructure. That means economic development. That means rail. That means potentially distribution centers, that means trucks, that means a lot of cargo, that means a lot of movement. And so I say all that because I think it's important that we have balance and we think through all that as we continue to build out that area of the county of Riverside. Obviously, we're talking about economic development and jobs, but we're also talking about balancing that out with public health and issues around air quality. And what does that look like moving forward for all our families? Those of you that would be moving there and those of you that would be working there and those that grew up there. Once again, look forward to having a conversation with the Teamsters, looking forward to working with my colleagues on what the future of the Eastern County of Riverside looks like. And I'm just happy to be here, at least for the first 30 to 40 minutes. You see me leave, it's because I have to keep going up to LA. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board member comments? Okay. Wayne,
Thanks, Madam Chair. If I could, we'd like to make a correction in the Spanish translation. We noted the wrong Zoom call-in, so if the translators could correct that right now, and then I can go into the parts that I'd like to address.
Buenos días. La corrección al número de identificación de la reunión en Zoom es 928-3000-3925. Nuevamente, el número correcto de identificación de la reunión en Zoom es 928-3000-3925. Gracias.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Excuse me. Just wanted to note a couple of items. One, at the last board meeting, we talked about the fact that we were trying to engage with railroads on an MOU discussion. And I promised the board that if we weren't moving in the direction that we needed to be, that we would immediately pivot back to an ISR effort. We advised the Mobile Source Committee that there was a condition that was requested to be placed on the MOU at the last minute that we felt was unacceptable. And we had given the railroads an opportunity to review that. They did not change their position. In fairness, it was one railroad in particular that made that demand, but we couldn't enter into an MOU and an ISR. So we had to have all or nothing. So we are now pivoting back to the ISR process, and I just wanted to update the board on that particular aspect. Also wanted to announce the fact that we'll be having our 34th annual Clean Air Awards ceremony next year, and that will be at the Pacific Palms in the City of Industry, and that's on April 5th. But we are now opening comments and suggestions and nominations for the awards. And I just want to touch on those awards. It's the S. Roy Wilson Award for Leadership in Government, the Robert M. Zwig, MD Memorial Award, the Dr. William A. Burke Award for Leadership in Environmental Justice, the John J. and Ben J. Benoit Award for Innovative Clean Air Technology, Leadership in Air Quality, and then finally, Youth Leadership in Air Quality. Nominations can be submitted via our website, and they're due by January 19th of 2024. And one other point is that most of the committee meetings are dark this month, except for the Climate Change Committee, which we're looking forward to on December 15th, and the Investment Oversight Committee. And that concludes my comments.
thank you. Okay, the next items on the agenda are elections. If you all recall, both the vice chair and I are serving the balance of Ben Benoit and my terms. So we have to vote for the next 2-year term. So I will open up the election of chair for nominations.
Madam Chair, I would like to nominate yourself as our continuing chair, Vanessa Delgado.
Second.
Thank you. I was a little nervous on that one. All right, so are there any other nominations? All right, can we get a roll call on that? Oh, we're doing voting?
We'll need to do an oral roll call for this one.
Okay.
Okay. Mayor Locke Dawson,
Aye.
Supervisor Doe is absent. Supervisor Hagman? Sorry?
I thought it was loud enough. Hagman, aye.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Krakoff?
Yes.
Mayor McCallum?
Yes.
Supervisor Mitchell?
Aye.
Board Member Padilla Campos?
Yes.
Supervisor Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Rahman?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Councilmember Solache?
Yes.
Vice Chair Caciotti?
Yes.
And Chair Delgado?
And I vote yes.
Motion passes 12-0 with one absent.
Thank you. Definitely appreciate the support. For those of you who know my history, I have a little bit of PTSD over serving just a remaining term of somebody's office. So, yeah. All right, with that, we'll go to the election of the vice chair. Any nominations? I know who I want to nominate, but I don't want to, if there's anybody else who would like to do the honors of nominating, I'll leave it open.
I'll nominate.
And I'll second.
I'll third it.
Who are you nominating?
I think it's you for sure, yes. We would like to,
I think it's the current vice chair.
yes, the
Oh,
current vice
sorry.
chair.
Yeah, Michael Cacciati.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right, are there any other nominations? Nope. All right, can we get a roll call on that, please?
Mayor Lock Dawson?
Aye.
Supervisor Doe is absent. Supervisor Hagman?
Hagman, aye.
Board Member Krakoff?
Yes.
Mayor McCallum?
Yes.
Supervisor Mitchell?
Yes.
Board Member Padilla Campos?
Yes.
Supervisor Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Rahman?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Councilmember Solache?
Yes.
Vice Chair Caciotti?
Yes.
And Chair Delgado?
Yes.
Motion passes 12-0, one absent.
Thank you, board members. Thank you very much.
All right. Now let's dive into the public comment period. So we do have 20 speakers here. Just given time limitations, I think 2 minutes, if we could keep it to 2 minutes. Do you want to call people up?
Yes.
Okay, and then we might have some online. Yes, we do. We have 6 online.
Okay. The first speaker, and if you can, we'll call 2 at a time. Do we have both microphones, Paul, or just one microphone? Just one, okay. We can come up in line so we can be ready. First speaker is Viviana Mena, and then Eric, followed by Eric Washington. I'll give you the third too if you want to come up there. Go on, please.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning. I'm here with my husband. We're a married couple with 2 kids working for AQMD to depend on these wages. Our dream right now is to buy a house, but with the wages that we're receiving right now through AQMD, it's not enough to put down for a down payment. From our 2 kids, our daughter knows that we work here, and her first day of school this year, she mentioned that when she grows up, she wants to work where her parents work at. It's sweet to hear from her that, but how I can encourage her to work here in the future if I know these wages are not helping us.
Hello, my name is Robert Mena, Viviana's husband. I actually worked here before her. I've only been here less than 3 years, but I've been working in the public for 23. And I knew about this agency a long, long time ago. And back then, it was really, really hard to get in here. It really was. I mean, I would apply and apply. It was just so hard because this agency was a shining beacon in the county and just in the area. And I'm glad that I'm here now. And I loved it so much that I went home. And at the time, I don't mean to put my own personal stuff on blast, but at the time, Viviana and I we weren't together. We were just strange. So we're separated. And I said, you need to come work for this place, even going through that. And when she did, she's happier, she's better. it worked out for us because I'm looking at people behind me and it's not just us. There are other family members here. And I don't mean by saying out there's a father that has a daughter in here, out there is a mother that has a son. No, I mean behind us, it's not just us as a family. Behind us is a father and a daughter, actually in the room, a mother and a daughter, a sister and a sister, inspectors, you know what they are, but this is not just a public agency. It's not just a public agency. We're all one thing that they used to call back in the day. We are one big, happy family. This is our family business. So please show us that you're behind us.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Eric Washington. After Eric, if you can line up Jesse Conway and William Brill. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you all. My name is Eric Washington, and I started here at the district as a career development intern, then as a mail clerk, and to now a supervisor, which I am grateful for the opportunity and the increase of wage that it came with. Sadly to say, in the last few years, my wages has not kept up with the cost of living. Gas, food, and basic living expenses has risen exponentially while our income seems to deteriorate year after year. As a single father of two growing sons, I have to manage what I have to meet their needs and to provide for them. If I'm honest, as one of the lowest paid supervisors here at the district, I really can't afford general rent. I'm living in a back house because I can't afford the current rental rate. And so I live in Long Beach, and when gas skyrocketed, I was paying about $700 a month or more just to get to work, to the point to where I had to make a hard decision to take a loan out to buy an old 2009 used Prius with over 200,000 miles on it, just so I can make it into work and that I don't go broke from filling up on gas 2 to 3 times a week. That may not make good sense, but because of the wage that I've made, that's the option that I was left with to stay afloat. And Lord forbid, something unexpected happens. Hopefully the board hears and understands the people that keep this place spinning. All we want to do is earn a good wage, provide for our families today, tomorrow, and work towards securing a bright future for the next generation in our families. But that won't be possible if the wages continue to be stifled. Quite frankly, it's hard to breathe sometimes because we are busy working and trying to make it work out, and so busy trying to figure it out because our wages don't match the cost of living, let alone the cost of death should someone die. As I take my seat, I want to leave you with this analogy. A healthy body has a good flow rhythm to it. Intake and expel, intake and expel. When the body begins to expel more than it's intaking, there is a problem, and that problem needs to be addressed. Please hear the voices and the hearts of the district and agree to a fair and competitive contract that will keep the district healthy, for it is the heart that keeps the body alive.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Welcome, Jesse.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm a contract assistant here at South Coast AQMD. I began my career as a summer student worker. I was hired as a temp, then became a full-time employee 9 years ago. I was attracted to the district's mission and the work culture my predecessors enjoyed, including my mother. They enjoyed fair and equitable wages, reasonably priced healthcare, a sensible workload, and a path for advancement. I'm here today to advocate for the livable wage with fair benefits that will not only entice people to work for the district, but will retain them once hired. My group began with 10 contract assistants when the pandemic began. Then we became a group of 3. We have lost employees to retirement and resignations by capable staff who can no longer afford to live with a wage that has not kept up with rising inflation. The wages offered by the district are no longer competitive enough to compete with better paying positions. As a result, the vacancy rate has remained high, which in turn has increased our workloads. Once new employees are hired, we pray that they stay long enough to impact our mounting assignments. Although inflation may be trending down, over the past 3 years, it has been very high. What the district is currently offering does not address the income hole created by high inflation and the district's lack of meaningful wage growth. Unless the hole is filled, the district will continue to see an exodus of highly skilled employees. I am speaking on behalf of not just employees, but as the public living within the district borders, the constituents you represent. Please help change the current work culture and provide us with the pay and benefits necessary to recruit and retain the employees needed to carry out this district's mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. William Brill is next, and then followed by Jennifer Nessler, Sandra Garcia, Jacqueline Drainville. You can see your names on the screen, but I'll just keep reading them out just to remind you, so you can get in line after that. Go ahead, William, and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my testimony. My name is William Brill. I'm the print shop supervisor. I come to speak before you today to provide some historical facts about wages at the South Coast AQMD. I have a unique perspective both in my time served as well as the positions I have held. I began my career in 1989 as the lowest level employee, which was back then called a student worker 1, making $6.10 an hour. About a year later, I was hired as a permanent employee in 1990 as a duplicator operator, making $10.50 an hour. At that time, minimum wage was $4.25 an hour. So I was making about 275% above the minimum wage. Next month, minimum wage in California will be $16 an hour, about a 376% increase, while AB 1228 will pay fast food workers $20 an hour in April, nearly a 471% increase from 1989. Step 1 for the lowest paid employee in my shop, also a duplicator operator as I was hired in 1990, currently stands at about $18.50 an hour for step 1. So something seems to have went wrong with our wages along the way. There's a lot of talk about inflation, but a lot of people don't know that the metrics to calculate inflation rate was changed in 1990 by politicians to give the illusion that they were doing a good job. Rents, mortgages, and food costs were taken out of the equation. The inflation numbers reported today do not reflect reality. Thank you for listening.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Nessler. I am a supervising office assistant in Compliance and Enforcement Division. Under the current retirement system, there are 2 classes of workers. There are those who get matching funds for their retirement and those who don't. I don't get matching funds for my retirement. I make less than $70,000 per year, and this agency feels I deserve a $300 stipend per year to my 457 account. Why is their well-being more important than mine? This agency has a DEI division, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Where's the equity for our retirement? It's time for this agency to do right by all of its workers. Equal contribution to everyone's retirement account. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. A little short. Good morning. My name is Sandra Garcia. I just recently started working for the agency, July of this year. Actually, Jennifer is my supervisor. And for about 2 months, it was just her and I, in one of the most busiest departments in this agency alone. Just a little bit of my history. I left the city of Riverside. Hi, Mayor. And in leaving the city of Riverside, I had to take a pay cut. Reason for it, I started looking at my expenses. Gas, I live down the street, literally 10 miles down the street. Gas was a huge reason, and maintenance on my car, just getting to and from the city of Riverside. Now, I look at some of my coworkers, and they're driving from the city of Riverside out here, and it blows me away as to why they would continue to do that. I made the conscious decision to leave the city of Riverside to save money, to have a little bit more in my pocket. Even with the pay cut coming over here, I was keeping afloat for a while until last pay period, when I had to, use a little bit more of my savings to purchase my Thanksgiving food for my kids. I'm looking at my account this morning and I'm literally at zero. How is that possible? I left the private sector. I used to work for a wealth management firm, and it was ingrained to save and put aside 10 to 30% of your salary for emergencies. With what just happened this last pay period, I can't afford a catastrophic event. That would deem my financial status it'll break me. I can't afford that. The Department of Housing.
Thank you. We've got to move, otherwise we're going to lose members. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Jacqueline Janeville. When I started working for South Coast AQMD, I was told that toxics and waste management was one of the most difficult groups to work in due to the types of cases they oversee: asbestos, hexavalent chromium, ethylene oxide. When I asked what the upsides to the group were, people got quiet. I was told that there was always plenty of overtime. As a new hire, I didn't realize what that meant. I knew coming to the agency that the organization was understaffed, but I was told they were hiring again. I didn't realize how high the vacancy rate was, or how high the turnover was, or how that would affect the workload in the group. I was immediately swamped with complex inspections and investigations, commuting over 3 hours one way to some sites. The paperwork started piling up, and I began to see a pattern. Overtime is always offered, and most of my coworkers use it to try to stay afloat. There are people who appreciate the extra money that overtime brings, but even they are feeling overworked, and they are still drowning in unending complaints, investigations, and inspections. Those of us who cannot work overtime are that much farther behind. There are not enough employees available to handle the workload, especially as the rules get more complex and the requirements get more stringent. I have tried to work what feels like mandatory overtime, but I truly don't have any extra time to give. I have 3 children, one in elementary, one in middle, one in high school. They all have extracurricular activities. My parents and in-laws are elderly and have complex medical care issues. They have been in and out of the hospital over the last few years. My parents' finances are not spectacular, and I am an only child. I don't have the money to find them permanent care solutions.
Thank you. Next.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, my name is Vander, not Vanderbilt, Ferrer Lay, and I stand before you today to represent the countless inspectors who work tirelessly on the front lines. Our DEO, Terrence Mann, constantly reminds us that we are the face of the agency. Our department is bleeding talent because the pay provided doesn't align with the work demanded. We are dedicated employees committed to our jobs, but the harsh reality is that our wages are a mere whisper in the symphony of LA's cost of living. I live on the west side of South Coast AQMD's jurisdiction on the toxics and waste management team. My sectors include El Segundo, Santa Monica, West Hollywood, and Los Angeles proper. And these are some of the places where we receive the most number of complaints, have the most number of high-profile facilities, and have the least number of inspectors available. Inspector Vincent Mota, whose sectors are closest to mine, must travel from the Inland Empire to downtown Los Angeles daily to help support me. This isn't just a personal grievance. It's a systemic problem that affects the vitality of our workforce. We become an agency divided. Those who are either forced to commute long distances, sacrificing precious time and energy, or those who are forced to live closer to their assigned sectors where cost of living far outpaces any real wage growth. The lack of competitive wages is not only an injustice to your employees, but a self-inflicted wound on the success and growth of our agency. Our dedication to the job should not be overshadowed by the struggle to afford a basic standard of living. It's time to invest in not only the success of our agency, but in the well-being and success of the very people who drive that success. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I can stand here and tell you about why I deserve a raise. Like many of my peers, I am a young professional beginning my career at South Coast AQMD. I can tell you how many children and how many seniors live in my household. I can tell you whether I have student loans, house payments, or car payments. I may even tell you whether I have a medical condition that requires ongoing treatment, but I'm not going to do that because our request for higher wages shouldn't be rooted in pity when we know that I'm working for every single dollar that I earn. This is an issue about fairness. It is an issue about our ability to live with dignity. We work hard, and we should be able to provide for ourselves and our family without working a second job during our 3-day weekend or by cutting back on essentials. We should not have to compromise our well-being to sustain ourselves. Similar agencies across different sectors have already taken steps to align wages with the cost of living. What is stopping AQMD from doing the same? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Gina Lombardo. I'm a senior office assistant in the billing services department. Short-staffed. How often do we hear that term being used? I know personally in my department, we've consistently had a number of vacant positions for almost as long as I've been in it, about 4.5 years now. We are constantly in the state of covering work in addition to our own for vacant positions. Temporarily is the word used as the measurement of time of how long we'll be covering for the vacancies. It's the longest temporarily I've ever experienced. When it comes to personal time off, due to having vacancies, the remaining staff members must compete for taking time off, which wasn't the case before. And if someone is granted time off and someone else calls in sick, guess what? Now we're significantly short-staffed for that time, and we've got to strategize how we're going to operate with even less people. We're already short-staffed. We're already covering for vacant positions. We're already covering extra phone days. We need to be able to take time off here and there, and sometimes we might need to call off and use a sick day. This all leads to a very overwhelming situation. It sometimes feels like we're treading water, barely staying afloat, but we do it because the show must go on. But it doesn't mean it's not stressful. The work we do is time sensitive, and yet sometimes it's time consuming. So by the district maintaining a certain vacancy rate level as a budgeting tool and operating with inadequate manpower, it leads to stressful days for sure. We haven't had full staff in a few years, and since that time, I've seen many people come and go through my department. They come on board, they go through the training, they help the department, and then they find a more attractive position that opens up. So, enough with the vacancies already, please. Meaningful increase in pay is needed so we can attract people, so we can have a chance at gaining more staff that will want to stay, allowing us to serve our public communities efficiently. Thank you.
Thanks, Gina.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. So it's really just echoing what everyone else has been saying. I've been here for 4 years, starting at the assistant level as an air quality instrument specialist, where I ended up moving into operations, where we work the entire gambit of the district from Northwest up to Santa Clarita, all the way down to the Salton Sea. And much like everyone else, we are constantly short-staffed. It feels like since I've been working here, I've been operating on a skeleton crew where we have just enough to keep things together, but as soon as someone gets sick or needs to call out, everybody starts to have to work 2 positions to cover for it. So in the reality, we try to get people in. We do get new trainees from time to time, but it takes time to train them. And once we go through the complex training, time to onboard them, and once they're all ready to go, they leave because they do not have the amount of money to actually live, so they look for a place that pays better. This has gone on so many times and has become such a recurring thing that it just feels like, what does it say to the people who do stay here? So I'm here for 4 years. Like, I believe in the mission. I'm loyal to the people who helped me here, have helped me work here, but when the district's not really helping me survive with the amount of money I'm getting paid, should I start to look on too? Thanks for listening to me.
Good morning, Chair Delgado, members of the governing board. I'm Ray Whitmer, the Teamster rep for all of your workers that are in the room today. As you know, we represent the office, clerical, maintenance, technical, and enforcement employees. These are the folks that do the heavy lifting day in and day out to implement the mission of this district, the vision that this board sets, the policies. They are the folks that are on the front line. And they do a remarkable job in protecting the communities that all of us serve. You know, there are Teamsters like Paul Wright, who has served this board for 32 years and never missed a board meeting. Paul, stand up for a second. Show him your Teamster t-shirt. Show him your shirt, Paul. I mean, what dedication. He has not missed a board meeting in 32 years. That is unbelievable. But that is the commitment of every Teamster worker in this room today. They are here. They're here for the long haul. They don't want to leave this agency. It's been a long time since we've been before this board. You've just heard from many of your workers. These workers have lost significant purchasing power over the last 5 years because their wages have not kept up with inflation. They've actually lost purchasing power. We've listened to the comments about recruitment, retention, and wages from our EO, Wayne Nastry, and from several of you over the last year, year and a half. You have recognized the problem. The current situation was not created by this board or this administration. It goes back years. It is a structural problem that started many, many years ago when the board decided to underfund the operations of this district.
Thank you,
And
Ray.
is my time already
wrap
up?
it up, just last comment.
Okay.
We got to move the meeting
Okay,
on,
well,
please.
I mean, this is it. You don't hear from us too often, so, you know, we need all of you to listen. We're here because we need to get a deal that includes real wage growth. That's the bottom line for us.
Thank you, Ray.
So we hope, when you
No, we gotta
give me
move on.
2
We
seconds.
have to move on.
We
Yes.
hope when you're in closed session today that you will support the administration and the pathway that we have put on the table to get a deal. With that, I want to thank all of you. Wish you all happy holidays. Hope that we don't have to come back here again. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Tris.
Thank you. Sorry. My name's
Excuse me, as you're leaving, please don't talk so we can hear the speaker. Thank you. No, go ahead.
Thanks. My name is Tris Carpenter, and I am a labor union consultant working for the Professional Employees Association, or PEA, the union that represents over 300 scientists, engineers, and supervisors here at South Coast, AQMD. This is the union that's not the Teamsters. We have a lot of the same problems, obviously. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning, and special thanks to the board members who've taken time out of their busy and demanding days to meet with us in the past. We welcome the opportunity to meet with the rest of you as well. Since July, we've been negotiating with management over 2 items. One is the healthcare and benefit contribution reopener that sets the contribution for 2024. And 2 is the successor contract to the current agreement that expires on January 1st. In terms of benefit reopener, we are at impasse. We've declared impasse. We are meeting with a mediator later in the month. We are simply looking for the same amount that the Teamsters are receiving, $1,911 per month. We're about $81 apart We've been told that there's some negotiation in the distant past where there were choices made about money going into wages versus benefits. There've been a lot of negotiation since then. There's a lot been lost and won. This is now a fundamental issue of fairness in terms of the way that people take care of themselves and their families. As for the successor MOU, we've made some progress, but we're still pretty far apart. A lot of our negotiating is, and our concern about this is driven by the fact that we've seen the agency fail to recruit and retain people. We've seen qualified senior candidates walk away, not candidates, but employees walk away, and qualified candidates not take a job here. Depending on the job, CARB pays between 10 and 17% more than AQMD in the PEA positions. If you want to recruit and retain the best and brightest, you're going to have to compete with those folks. Even if you don't care about what CARB pays, we're still 11% behind over the last 10 years in terms of wages. So again, this is a pivotal point. This is your decision. If you want to preserve the legacy of the organization and ensure that it continues to serve the public, you need to offer a competitive wage and benefit package. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome, Bettina. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Bettina Burley Sanchez. I'm the current president of the South Coast Professional Employees Association, as I have been for over 5 years. The fact that employees are willing to speak to the governing board speaks volumes about the situation here at AQMD. People have generally refused to draw attention to themselves in this way, myself included. But why? People were fearful of negative consequences from their own management and therefore afraid of the governing board. However, that fear is obviously diminishing, especially as individuals become aware of better paying, less stressful opportunities elsewhere. While our vacancy rate does fluctuate, we have on more than a few occasions witnessed colleagues leaving for better opportunities mere days or weeks after joining us. There is a quote I'd like to share that fits very well for our case. Take a job that you love, and you'll never have to work a day in your life. But remember, if you don't get paid fairly, you won't be able to afford to love it for long. As a senior engineer here, it is disheartening to note that my salary is on par with an assistant engineer in a neighboring sanitation district. Moreover, there are employees within our agency responsible for crucial tasks that are essential to this agency's mission, earning less than fast food workers. How is this possible at the nation's premier air quality agency? I'm here because I care about the health of our community and environment and all of my 900+ coworkers. But supporting my family will always be my top priority. In today's world, no employee should face the dilemma of choosing between a fulfilling job that helps their community and providing for their family. For years, our salaries have been outpaced by inflation rates, placing every single employee here at a disadvantage. We advocate for 11.5% across the board wage increase beginning January 1st, 2024,
Thank you.
coupled
Next.
with the cost of living adjustments
Thank you.
beginning in 2025. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, esteemed members of the governing board. My name is Wilton Moy. I am an employee at South Coast. I want to be clear that I love what I work on, I love my coworkers, and I love the mission and the reputation of this agency. I'm also an at-large member of the South Coast Professional Employees Association Union. And as such, it is my duty to speak for the union members that I serve. I appear before you as one person, but I ask you to visualize me as a legion of 300 professionals possessing the best science, engineering, and policy talent you could ever hope for. Many feel voiceless to tell you that they don't feel appreciated or respected for the education and experience they've built up, or for the fact that they stayed here to carry out the hard work. On their heels, they feel the gnaw of rising rents and inflation. In their stomach, they feel demoralized from Goliath workloads as colleagues left and positions remained vacant. And on their wrist, they feel the pull of opportunities elsewhere that offer them financial peace in a world of constant calamity. In our negotiations meetings, we have made it clear what salary increase is needed to make our members envision a long-term career here. What salary increase is needed to stop all of the new talent in the pipeline from just going to CARB because of the dollar figure on their job postings. Disappointingly, there is an enormous gap between what is needed and what we've been offered. When it comes to what professionals have been offered for raises, let's just say that for the district, this is another non-attainment area. But this is a non-attainment area that you have the power to fix. It is my belief that everyone on the governing board wants this agency to keep folks here, attract new talent, perform effectively and efficiently, and remain the premier air district, and ultimately, to just serve the people well. Thank you.
Okay, this thing's weird, sorry. Hear me well? Awesome. Good morning. My name is Gurpreet Matthew. I've been working at this agency for 6 years now as an air quality engineer in the permitting division. I'm also a representative for SCPEA, which is one of the unions here at this agency. I've been involved in ongoing contract negotiations with management and also part of the teleworking committee. Today, I'll share with you some of the things I've seen over the past few years I've been here. As mentioned before, I'm an air quality engineer. My team handles permit applications for a variety of industries and equipment. We currently have around a quarter of the entire division's workload and the most newest staff. Back when I started in 2017, my team had 17 air quality engineers. Now, 6 years later, I'm the last one of those left. You imagine? That's why the backlog is so crazy right now. Okay. In addition, during my time here, my team hired a total of 26 engineers from outside the agency. A third of them have quit. We are not doing enough to keep these people. When I spoke with them about their reasons for leaving, they told me a variety of reasons. They left for better salary, benefits, telework options, less stress, burnout, and wanting a better work-life balance. And when I heard all that, I wasn't surprised. Those thoughts came across my mind too. Why do I stay here and put up with this abuse? Regarding burnout, there's a constant pressure to get things done, not just in our division, but every division across this agency. People work overtime in order to maintain the status quo. And the problem is that when you have people working 50+ hours a week on a consistent basis and constantly stressed, they get burned out. In some cases, they leave for greener pastures. And when those people leave, the cycle continues and the people that stay get all their work and it just piles on and the cycle just keeps going and going. When it comes to salaries, an engineer in a non-supervisory role at CARB makes it the same or more than a supervising engineer here at AQMD. In other words, an engineer at CARB makes more than my boss's boss, okay?
Thank you.
You know what this agency needs? This agency needs competitive, it needs to be competitive in the job market and actually focus on keeping employees. It takes a long time to train people.
Thank you.
No.
We heard you. Thank you.
Understand that this is really important. We have never spoken to the board like this before. Never. Our union has never done that. You need to hear us out. This is important. We're struggling. Okay? Our people are stressed out, burning out, and quitting. Our backlog is crazily high. Please, hear us out.
Thank you very much.
It's-
We're hearing everybody, we hear everybody. We've got a large agenda
Okay.
and we're looking to be losing members. Thank you very much for your time.
Just one
Next.
last thing. It's sad when
Last-
new
wrap it up,
employees
last
want to leave.
sentence.
I hope you can encourage executive council to do the right thing and offer us competitive wages, permanent telework program. Thank you. Sorry, I took too long.
Thanks for your time.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Andrew Burris. I'm a senior air quality chemist at the South Coast AQMD laboratory. First, I extend my gratitude for the governing board for your steadfast commitment to our mission of clean air, which directly impacts the lives of all district employees as well, including my own. In my 8 years here, the work has been incredibly fulfilling, contributing to the health of all of our neighbors in the South Coast Basin, and that really means a lot to me. However, a notable decline in morale has surfaced recently, primarily due to compensation issues. Salaries have not kept pace with neighboring agencies, which has led to a talent drain and a concerning increase in vacancies. The strain is palpable as we find ourselves doing more with less, carrying heavier workloads and responsibilities. Yet I remain optimistic. I believe progress is achievable. With your support, we can address these challenges, enhance morale, and safeguard our mission. Thank you so much for your time, consideration, and dedication to our collective goals. Thank you.
I am an SCPE member and former Teamsters brother, here in solidarity with my fellow members, brothers, sisters, and siblings to speak regarding ongoing contract negotiations. I have faithfully served this district for more than 9 years, and my father faithfully served this district for more than 30 years as a student worker, inspector, and supervisor. Before him, my grandfather faithfully served this district and its predecessor agency for more than 40 years. On January 1st, the South Coast AQMD will celebrate its 47th birthday. I'm 45, and when you get up to our age, you have appointments that rhyme with oscopy and ogram. They are uncomfortable, but they are important. That's what this is today. So how is this 47-year-old doing? Not well. The clearest signal is the permit backlog that we have heard is currently around 2 years. This is a result of our vacancy rate, which has flirted with 20%, well above our target of 10%. We got to 20% by failing to attract and to keep talented staff. We have heard we are no longer competitive in compensation. We see our employer contribution to healthcare not keeping up with costs, and our telework is not guaranteed. It is time for management and labor to work collaboratively in good faith to boost pay, fairly and fully fund healthcare, and enshrine telework to return this 47-year-old to its former glory as one of the best places to work. It is time to stop the bleed at the South Coast AQMD.
Good morning, everyone. Let the record show that my heart rate is at 135 right now.
Welcome aboard. Thank you.
My name is Randy Lamb, and I've been working at the district for the past 6 years. I am an air quality specialist and a member of the Professionals Union. The South Coast AQMD has a great reputation as far as government agencies go. And I think I speak for many of my colleagues when I say that this is a wonderful place to work. Despite being a small local government entity, our agency is revered around the world for our innovative work in air quality. Whenever I attend conferences, people seem to think that we're swimming in money because of the cutting edge research and groundbreaking monitoring efforts that we put out. Another organization even joked that South Coast was going to launch a satellite into space for our next study. There is no question that this agency punches above its weight, and the reason we are able to do so is because of the bright minds who are here to make it happen. We have talented staff and great leadership at the district, and I have learned a great deal from the brilliant people who work here. However, some of these colleagues have moved on to positions elsewhere. Our projects are still here though, and those of us who remain need new talent to maintain progress on the important work that we do. South Coast has a great reputation, and we need to be able to attract top candidates in order to uphold that reputation. We have a noble mission, but we also need competitive pay to attract the best talent to do the work. I am proud to say that I work at the South Coast AQMD, and I hope that we can continue to lead the way in fighting air pollution. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Randy.
Hello, my name is Corey Griggs. I've had a prepared speech here about a problem I have with Rule 1111, but I don't need it any longer because I know what's wrong. We have equipment that doesn't work. That's a manufacturer problem. We can work that out. We're smart. We can deal with this. You guys can't enforce this regulation at all. And now I know why, okay? I have literally turned at least two companies in that violate this on a regular basis. You could go out, get all your fines in the world if you wanted, if you just actually maybe paid these people to do their jobs or get some more of them, okay? Stop making these regulations that affect literally every man, woman, and child, every house in Southern California, and then have no ability to enforce it. Zero. It's ridiculous. I'm a contractor in the mountains. I have equipment that doesn't work. I have customers that are freezing, think that I'm the problem. And then I have my competitors literally just cheating this regulation,
right underneath your noses, and you have zero ability to do anything about it. You want to save the environment? Let's work together to get it done. But this is stupid. What I have to say here is just dumb now, okay? This needs to change right now. We have people in the mountains that are cold. We have people in the mountains that are cheating. It's ridiculous, okay? So I apologize for being angry. I had a nicer speech to deliver. I thought I was here on the wrong day, but by the way, I'm here on the exact right day, okay? So fix it.
Yes.
I've also ripped up my speeches, but for different reasons. Wayne, we worked very hard on this rule. This was very important. Supervisor Rutherford, before she left, about making sure that this equipment could function up at the high altitudes. Is this something we can look into?
There's actually active ongoing cases associated on this very issue. I'm not going to go into any details other than to say we've issued NOVs and we continue to look into this matter. And for all the reasons that you said and for what Mr. Griggs said as well, but we're actively engaged. And that's really all I'm going to say at this point.
Okay, putting aside the enforcement, this issue about the manufacturers and the equipment, if there's issues, because I know there were some concerns about the functioning at the high altitudes, just make sure that our staff is on it. And if there needs to be a report back to stationary source or whatever it is, I know that you'll get that done. Thank you.
I'm going to have to move the agenda on and save any other board member comments for later. We have 9 speakers still for public comment online. We'll start with Felipe Aguirre, 2 minutes.
Hello, hi, my name is Felipe Aguirre. I'm a member of Comité Pro Uno here in the city of Maywood, California, and I'm speaking in support of the item on the rule for sterilizers 1405. We really are supporting the adoption of
Sounds
this.
like Mr. Aguirre is speaking on the rule that's not meant to be discussed in general public comment. I'd suggest that he use his time during that time.
All right, so then we'll
Thank
speak
you.
at that time.
Okay, we're on public comment items not on the agenda. Caleb Phillips. I think we've moved to Jerry Desmond.
Thank you, Chair and members. I'm calling in on a different issue. I am Jerry Desmond, speaking briefly on behalf of the Cemetery and Mortuary Association of California. We feel we're obliged to bring to the attention of the governing board our concerns that cemeteries remain unable to purchase new crematories that are in compliance with the 30 part per million NOx emission limits established by the district in May of 2022 as amendments to Rule 1147. Cemeteries purchase the crematory retorts from a small list of 3 manufacturers, and our information is that those companies, although striving to adapt to the rule, are unable to provide new retorts that meet the reduced emission limits today, 18 months after their adoption. Purchases have been placed on hold, and in some cases have been canceled. A backlog starting to take shape. We brought this issue to the attention of the district 6 months ago. We had an initial conversation in June, and we've been engaged since then with the district in a good faith effort to obtain some kind of accommodation. The manufacturers confirmed that there are significant challenges to developing and bringing compliant burners to the market for both new and retrofit applications. The district has just informed us that a source test is underway for 1 manufacturer. While this would certainly be a positive development, we don't know the identity of the company, don't yet have confirmation that the reduced emission limits are achievable, and don't know what the necessary time frame will be for compliant products to be developed, purchased, permitted, and installed either initially or at scale. With the baby boomers aging, the death rate in California increasing, and the demand for cremation at nearly 70% and climbing, this rule is set to create an unintended public health crisis as existing units eventually break down and can't be replaced. We must work together to ensure we're not unprepared. We can't overlook the lessons of the COVID pandemic and the unprecedented challenges cemeteries and funeral establishments overcame to protect public health and safety. Please make sure we're not making the situation even more difficult. Thank you.
Do you want to reply to that at all? No?
We certainly are aware of the situation. We do know of one manufacturer that has met the standards. We continue to look into other manufacturers and working with the trade association.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Jerry's a real good person to work with. And Jerry, if you have follow-up or need issues, you can contact my office too.
Caleb Phillips.
Good morning, board members. My name is Caleb Phillips, and I'm a former South Coast Air Quality Management District air quality engineer. I worked in permitting for a little over 3 years and left in mid-2020. I'm here to support the South Coast Professional Employees Association in their request for more competitive wages. One of the many reasons I left is a non-competitive salary and an unhealthy work environment. I am now in a non-supervisory specialist role that does not require a college degree, making more money than a supervising engineer. My new position with the state has better benefits and a better work-life balance that allows flexible telework. I believe the South Coast AQMD fosters a culture that does not put the employees first. I never felt valued by the agency, and I believe the executive management treats employees as if they are disposable. I always said that one of the best things about working at the SCAQMD was the people, and I had the privilege to work for and with many brilliant engineers. The people of this agency are its greatest resource, and yet they are not valued. I experienced firsthand the challenges and difficulties of being trained to be an engineer at the SCAQMD. It took me about 3 months to be fully competent to complete simple permit applications, and about 2 years until I was fully competent to work independently on the most difficult Title V and reclaimed permit applications. Having a high turnover reduces the ability of the agency to perform its mission and makes work difficult for the personnel who remain. Because of the high turnover, I was delegated many complicated projects much earlier than I should have been and greatly increased the stress I was under. It was another of the factors in my decision to leave the agency. Since I have left the South Coast AQMD, I have been much happier, better paid, and have a better work-life balance. I support the professionals union negotiation requests, and I hope you can help them make SCAQMD a better place to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Miriam?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, yes, my name is Mary Moore, and I am a Sun Valley resident and also member of Sun Valley Area Neighborhood Council. I'm here in my individual capacity, and I sent out a few comments via email for this board meeting, but I also wanted to be present and bring up a few issues that here in Sun Valley, we face in Sun Valley. And I wanted to let the board know that we have filed many, many complaints in the last 3 years with AQMD. However, we haven't heard anything. There was no action taken into our problems. And just to talk about the problems, I will be brief. We live in the middle of a very, very polluted neighborhood. It's called Sun Valley Park area neighborhood. We live literally 30 feet away from a recycling plant, from other silicon dust producing businesses. And no matter how many times we report these problems, all we hear is an investigator calling and telling us that he found no wrongdoing in anything. People and businesses operate using valid permits. However, we don't go to AQMD to verify the permits. We are asking AQMD to help us reduce this pollution, this air pollution, this dust, this odor, this noise coming out of this recycling plant. I just wanted to bring this issue up to the board and to kind of let you know that all our requests and pleas for help have been unanswered. It's been 3 years, at least 3+ years that I have been doing it myself. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know staff is taking notes. All right, Vincent Mota?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name is Vincent Mota, and I'm a South Coast Air Quality Inspector with the Toxics and Waste Management team. I've been with the district for a little over 2 years now, and I want to carry on with what some of the other fellow inspectors have been saying, that we have a crisis on our hands. The work that we do as inspectors is very challenging, and the pay currently being offered is not enough to retain qualified individuals. Starting pay is especially low, and several inspectors work multiple jobs to try and make ends meet. In my hiring class, only half of those currently remain as inspectors. Some have left for other departments at the AQMD which offer better pay, and some have left for the private sector. Even as an air quality inspector too, and someone who has multiple hazardous material training certificates and a degree in engineering, who is trying to protect the public from air toxins, I am currently considered low income.
I think we've lost, no. We'll move on to David and we'll try to come back to Ms.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, there you are.
Okay, I'll try to pick up where I think I left off. Even as an air quality inspector too, and someone who has multiple hazardous material training certificates and a degree in engineering, who is trying to protect the public from air toxins, I am still currently considered low income for LA County. The task of juggling dozens, at times hundreds of complaints, equipment breakdowns, routine inspections, and reports on a daily basis is made more difficult by understaffing. We cover even larger areas of densely populated sections, and the complainants, the public, are impacted by longer complaint response times, and as sometimes we can't even make it to the fields to make contact with them. We're getting burnt out. We need competitive wages to make difference. We inspectors are giving it our all to try and serve the public, and I implore you to better support us with higher wages so that we can continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. We have David on the line.
I'm here, yes. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is David Herman, and I dedicated 2 years of my life a couple years ago to AQMD. I wanted to work there from the time I got into grad school to the time I left. However, I ultimately left AQMD after 2 years back to academia due to the inadequacies of the pay scale at AQMD and the issues with, the freedom necessary to do the job ultimately I was hired to do. So ultimately today, I'm speaking with you to address the issues of inadequate compensation that AQMD experiences. I really support what the unions are trying to push for. There's been a lot of drain, at least in the specific area I was in, back to academia, where what we were hired for is much more appropriate. We were hired to think and work on our feet, whereas AQMD, we're constantly questioned and making sure we're not going to get in trouble, which I don't think is the right way to play what you guys are trying to accomplish. So ultimately, if you're going to hire people who you want to think and do better science within the district, you need to pay them appropriately, treat them appropriately, let them work for you when they feel and how they feel is appropriate. And it's not just about my personal experiences, but as you've heard throughout the entire past conversation today, you're losing a lot of people to a better work-life balance outside the district. So I hope you support changes coming up and compensation changes. So thanks for your time and your consideration. That's all I got.
Thank you. Brian?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Good morning, members of the governing board. My name is Brian Vlasich, and I am an air quality specialist in MAD and the current vice president of the South Coast Professionals Bargaining Unit. I've served with this agency for 24 years, and I've had the pleasure of speaking with many of you already about the current contract negotiations and some of the issues related to retention, recruitment, compensation, benefits, and telework. Our salaries have lost ground due to inflation, and a significant correction is essential to our standing as a leading scientific agency in our field. I acknowledge that many of you have a good understanding of the issues facing this agency, and we need to close the 11% gap behind CPI and the 10 to 17% gap behind equivalent positions at CARB, which EC acknowledged back in May governing board that we are losing staff to similar agencies. I understand that there are difficult decisions to be made regarding this contract, but what the vacancy rate does not account for is the loss of decades of institutional knowledge in recent years which cannot be easily replenished, especially if competitive salaries are not offered to prospective employees. A much-needed salary adjustment will address these problems with both retention and recruitment. I strongly urge the governing board to consider the testimony given today and to stop the bleed at the district. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Hector Gonzalez?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you're being
Yes,
heard.
hello, my name is Hector Gonzalez. I am also a resident of Sun Valley. I'm also a resident of the neighborhood Sun Valley Park. I believe there have been other people from Sun Valley that have attended and spoken regarding the issues of air quality in our community. Very simply, we need help to address this issue. The issue of air quality, pollution, dust in our neighborhood is, at least to our observation, out of control. We really don't know how to go about addressing this issue because, as one of my neighbors pointed out, we've done what we've been told to do, which is file complaints, and it really feels like we're just being unheard. Yeah, just very simply, as a resident community member, we just want to be heard, and we need help addressing the dust and air quality issues of the Sun Valley community. Thank you.
Board Member Padilla Campos?
Yeah, thank you. I just felt the need to say something, being that it's a second Sun Valley resident, being that that's where I grew up, and the reason why I do environmental justice as a career, because I saw so much going on in my neighborhood, right? So I hope that we can maybe Wayne later have a conversation about this and really make the community feel heard. And so, yeah, I felt the need. I had to say something. I really appreciate those that have testified today.
Yeah, thank you, board member. Clearly, there needs to be some additional outreach. I think there's some challenges in the complaint process. I know that when our inspectors are aware, we go out, we try to follow up, but perhaps we can work with you, and the others will be reaching out to further look into this. Thank you.
It sounds like there are representatives from the neighborhood council. Perhaps somebody can attend one of their board meetings or committee meetings.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Paola Vargas?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Paola Vargas, a community organizer with East Yards Communities for Environmental Justice. I want to first give my thanks to staff for not moving forward with the rail MOU. But again, as you've probably heard many times by now, this process has now proven community stance that it only exists to delay. I'm sure I also don't need to remind you that the rule for new rail yards was supposed to be considered back in October of this year. So my hope and call for the Air District is for this recent decision to produce completely robust ISRs for both new and existing rail yards, and will also completely discourage a port MOU from coming forward, as now that we've seen once again, even the consideration of a similar process will put all of us behind on what I know are our collective goals, but particularly the goals of our communities to continue to better our air quality, electrify this harmful polluting industry, and ultimately save the lives and better the lives and health of our families and neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. D.H. McKee? And our final speaker will be Crystal.
Yes, this is Duncan McKee, and I would like to talk about whether the board has been briefed by staff in regards to the application by Quometco/RSR, whatever they want to call themselves, the lead acid battery hazardous waste disposal facility. Their application is to incinerate hazardous waste, plastic and rubber, and increase the amount of kettles they have. I'm not sure if the board's been briefed. DTSC certainly knew nothing about it. You would think if the agencies are working together, would like to see better communication between the regulatory agencies, and that should include the community. And you've had reported to you as recently as yesterday, burning plastic odors in and around that facility. For the last 2 weeks, they've been over there with several cranes installing what appears to be new equipment. I suspect if you send an inspector like Michael Haynes over there, that you might be able to potentially find enough violations to be able to give all your workers a raise and get back on track here. And I mean, after hearing your workers, I can understand why you're having trouble regulating these facilities, but this is a really important. It had the highest cancer burden, the highest cancer rate of any facility in the South Coast Basin. And we're asking the board to be aware of this, to be involved in it. We're asking staff to take this seriously and to seriously communicate with the community in this regard. We're vehemently opposed to them burning, incinerating hazardous waste in our community. Thank you for the opportunity to participate.
Thank you so much. And Felipe Aguirre has spoken.
I believe he was going to speak on 1405. And I also think you did close public comment.
I did. Crystal is no longer on the list. But okay, with that, thank you so much for everybody who's participated today. I wish that we had more time to take board member comments, but we haven't yet started the rest of the agenda. So I'll move to the consent calendar. Are there any items that board members would like to pull? Mayor McCallum.
Not to pull, but I have a disclosure that I need to make, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Agenda item number 6, I don't have a financial interest, but I am required to identify for the record that I am the chair of the Mobile Source Air Pollution Reduction Review Committee, which is involved in this item.
Thank you. Supervisor Hagman.
Thank you. I have the same disclosure for agenda item number 6. I don't have a financial interest, but I am identifying for the record that I'm a member of the Mobile Source Air Pollution Reduction Committee, which is involved in this item.
Thank you. Any other board member disclosures or comments?
Yes, Chair. For item 5, I do not have a financial interest, but I'm required to identify for the record, Gideon Krakow, that I'm a board member for the California Air Resources Board, which is involved in this item.
Go ahead. Babe. No. Oh, everybody got theirs? Okay. All right. We do have comments from the public on the agenda. I'll turn to the vice chair.
Okay. Let me see. On item number 5, Christian Tapia Delgado.
I don't think we're related. You never know, though.
Welcome, Christian.
And I believe she has comments on items 2, 5, and 14.
You're right. So what do we do with that, Bay? All at once or?
Generally, yes.
In 2 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, Christian, go ahead. You can testify on all 3 items at once. 2 minutes total.
Okay, sure thing. Hi, good morning. My name is Cristian Tapia Delgado. Good morning, Chair Delgado, AQMD board and staff. I am a downtown Long Beach resident where I've lived for 13 years and a member of East Yard Community for Environmental Justice and the new climate campaigner for Southern California with Pacific Environment. I attended Cabrillo High School on the west side of Long Beach, where I could see the daily emissions from the Valero Marathon refineries daily. I also wanted to go ahead and say that the smoke and dust odors associated with these refineries were fortunately a part of everyday life for me and many others in my community. The refineries are a major part of the reason why folks in my community suffer from various health and respiratory diseases, but many don't know the ways these emissions are directly affecting them. My community and communities like mine deserve to know what and how much of these refineries' hazardous emissions they are being exposed to. And I am in strong support of the fence line monitoring rule. I wanted to add that way that community members are knowing what they're being exposed to. But I wanted to go ahead and say that I am against the exemption for refineries classified as having low emissions. Refineries, no matter the size, emit particulate matter, nitrogen oxide, and carbon monoxide, other life-threatening pollutants in the communities that people need to know when they are being exposed to. There should be a standard for all refineries and facilities in the community to go ahead and let community residents know when they are being exposed to hazardous emissions. And we believe that this rule is generous enough, considering that what a lot of the community residents would like to see is a transition to zero emission technologies. Thank you again. Wanted to say again that I'm in strong support of the rule, but against the staff, and would ask the staff to remove the exemption before the final language on December 5th that would exclude refineries. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Next is, and she's, I guess, this person, Danielle Hidari, will be speaking on items number 5 and 14. You've got 2 minutes. Go ahead, please. And welcome, Danielle.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Delgado, board, AQMD staff. My name is Danielle Hidari, and I serve as Climate Campaign Manager of Advocacy at Pacific Environment, which is a local to global environmental NGO with consultative status at the International Maritime Organization, the body that sets the global shipping laws. And I would just like to thank the AQMD for going back to a rulemaking process for rail yards. I think that's very important that fossil fueled rail yards receive regulation and that the AQMD serves its purpose by protecting public health. In the same breath, I would like to express some disappointment that the ports indirect source rule has now been delayed to Q4 of 2024. It was originally supposed to be discussed at this meeting, but then it was delayed to Q2 of 2024, and now it's delayed to Q4 of 2024. So that's a year of delay. And port pollution has gotten very bad in recent years with pandemic related trends. So this ports indirect source rule comes at a much needed time. So I would like to urge the AQMD to reconsider this delay and to think about moving forward with the ports indirect source rule earlier and no further delays, please. And I would like to thank you for agenda item number 5 for funding zero emission infrastructure. I think that's very important, part of the overall picture for transitioning to zero emissions. I would like to urge the board to consider only green hydrogen fueling for hydrogen. Various shades of hydrogen come from fossil fuels, but green hydrogen is the zero emission solution produced from electrolysis. So thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. That's all that are here in the district auditorium. We'll move now to virtual. We'll start with Fernando Gaitan. Fernando, go ahead, please.
Hi, good morning. Fernando Gaitan with Earth Justice. I'm speaking today on item number 14 concerning the rulemaking forecast. First, I also want to thank staff for listening to community concerns about the flawed MOU previously considered for the rail yards and committing now to the indirect source rule. This is the right decision to make. This is the second time in the last 2 years that industry interests have stalled the development of life-saving rules by seeking negotiations for voluntary agreement. And it's the second time these efforts have failed. We now need to make up for lost time. The port and rail ISRs have the potential to make significant emissions reductions at the most polluting sites impacting vulnerable communities. These 2 rules are the next logical step flowing from the warehouse ISR, a rule that has already shown huge dividends in the form of health benefits and catalyzing investments in charging infrastructure and zero emissions fleets. We are now facing the prospect of missing several opportunities to do the same for rail yards and ports unless the ISRs are finalized. The South Coast would be in a much better position today to chart a clear path to zero emissions and capitalize on the unprecedented federal and state funding if these rules were in place. Unfortunately, the rulemaking forecast now predicts these 2 rules will be delayed for yet another year. Chair Delgado, last year, this board passed the most important air plan in its history, the 2022 AQMP. The plan declares in no uncertain terms that to get to attainment, we need to invest in zero emission technology. We urge you to allocate the resources, support staff, and commit to finalizing these rules without further delay to ensure that communities on the front lines see the needed relief from air pollution they have endured for decades. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando. Our next speaker is Laura Cortez. Laura, can you identify which item you're speaking about? And welcome and go ahead.
Good morning, board. My name is Laura. I'm speaking on item number 2, which is the refinery monitoring rule. I wanted to express my support for this rule. Also, I'm with Eastern Communities for Environmental Justice, and I am from Tongva lands of so-called Los Angeles. So for Rule 1180, I wanted to express my support and also wanted to make a request. So given we've had multiple conversations with AQMD staff to make sure we're aligned, to make sure that the monitoring rule is the strongest that it possibly can, we found out that there is a last minute exemption. Why? What is the reason? I don't know the reason. And I don't think that there needs to be one. We've talked about this so much. We've discussed this. And so our request is that by the December 5th release of the final document, that exemption be removed, please. So that is very, very critical. Otherwise, we will express our support for 1180. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura, for your testimony. We'll go right now to caller in user number 1. If you can please, before you speak, identify which item you're speaking about, and then you can testify. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Ranji George. Good morning and congratulations, Chair and Vice Chair, for your elections. I was an ex-employee of TAO, the Technology Advancement Office, and we had the privilege of laying the foundation for zero-emission technologies. We were the first in the country to do that, both the batteries and later the hydrogen. These were the revolutions we set in motion, and we're glad to hear the world has embraced it. Now, my comment is for item number 5 and a little bit on item number 4. The TAO has issued a $200 million worth of zero-emission infrastructure. That's very good, excellent. And it's mentioned hydrogen there, but there's no quota for hydrogen. And this has been, unfortunately, the case for hydrogen for the last 20 years. A lot of lip service for hydrogen, but when it comes to actual funding, at the end of the road, after all the funding has been dispersed, hydrogen got very little. Natural gas got 95% of all the funding, Carl Moyer and other such funding. Technology, batteries got about 7 or 8%, and hydrogen got 2%. At each RFP, hydrogen is mentioned, but at the end of the road, hydrogen gets very less. So I urge the board members to put a definite quota for these technologies, so both technologies are handled neutrally. And secondly, I would like to also urge you to consider looking at the MATES program, that you are moving $5 million, I understand, from Clean Fuels program to the MATES program. When I was working, and we were told by legal not to do that, not to mix operations versus clean fuel funds. I don't know if anything has changed, but we were castigated by the legal people, and they said it may go to a slippery slope. So please do not.
Thank you, Ranji. Next speaker is Cindy. Cindy, go ahead. Please identify which item you're speaking about.
Everyone, my name is Cindy. My pronouns are she, her. I'm an organizer with Eastern Communities for Environmental Justice and a community member here on Tongva territory, or so-called Los Angeles, specifically in Southgate in Southeast LA. And I'm calling about item number 2, the refinery fence line monitoring rule. I want to thank the staff for all the listening and work that has been done into the completion and where we are with the refinery fence line monitoring rule. I'm hopeful that this will provide a lot of information, data, and insight, as well as actions for cleaner air for communities that live along and next to refineries and related facilities. However, it is important for me to name a concern that arose in the recent weeks. Staff introduced a low emission based capacity exemption in last month's stationary source committee that had never been discussed before. Like previous speakers have mentioned, we've been working very well with the staff, very well with the AQMD, and this completely caught many of us off guard. There was no staff report where we can see more information or understand where this exemption came from. And it feels completely unnecessary. And so I do want to ensure a strong rule, and I do want to prevent further delays for this to be actually approved and passed in January. However, it's important for this exception to be removed from the language that's going to be shared and distributed by like December 5th or 6th, if I'm correct, looking at the timeline. So again, I completely support this rule. I do not want to create further delays, but this exemption is uncalled for, and I really urge the staff to remove it for December 5th. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Next speaker is Dory Chandler. Dory, please identify which item you're speaking about.
Hi, I'm speaking today on agenda item number 5, the issue program announcement. My name is Dory Chandler. I'm with the Coalition for Clean Air. And we wanted to thank South Coast for the program announcement soliciting applications to support ZE infrastructure by allocating funding with a focus on projects targeting medium and heavy duty trucks and shore power. We are especially grateful that this will include a set aside for low income and disproportionately impacted areas, including the 50% of the funding as designated by the Carl Moyer program and AB 617 Community Protection Program fund requirements. We hope that as additional state and federal grant funding and other funding comes through for this, that a similar set aside to these heavily burdened communities is included. It's important also that South Coast is taking the steps to move away from funding natural gas fueling stations and focusing instead on the zero emissions electric fueling infrastructure. We're really grateful for that. And we're really excited to see the impact that these funding opportunities will make in our zero emissions infrastructure development. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dory. We're going to cut off public comment right now with Melanie Cohn, Biocom, and we'll move to our next speaker. Is it Crystal or Dory? Crystal, go ahead.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes, go ahead and please identify
Awesome.
which item you're speaking about. Thank you.
I'm speaking on item number 2. Thank you for your time. My name is Cristal Esparza, born and raised and community member of Tongva territory of so-called Southeast Los Angeles. I'm also a community member with East Yard Community for Environmental Justice. I remind you that today and for decades, emissions from SoCal refineries and other related adjacent facilities continue to be a major threat to our health and our climate. A major concern, which happened at last committee that I also gave public comment, was that staff introduced a low emissions based capacity exemption. And I urge the staff to remove this exemption before the rule language comes out on December 5th. By doing so, we ensure that we have a strong rule and prevent further delays on the rule implementation. Some of you in the room might be privileged enough to not be affected like our communities have been for many generations. So I ask you to stand with us and fight for clean air now and for future generations, as if your life and the lives of your loved ones are in danger just like ours. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Next speaker is Jesse Marquez. Jesse, welcome. And please identify which item you're speaking about on our agenda. Jesse, you're on mute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, good morning, Jesse.
Okay, good morning. I'm speaking on Rule 1405, the sterilization rule.
Jesse,
and I want to begin by first stating I am the executive director of the.
Jesse, excuse me, we haven't got to that yet. That'll be during a later portion. If you can just hold on for a few minutes. Thanks, Jesse. Move to our next speaker is Jan Victor. Jan, go ahead and please identify which item you're speaking about.
Hello, can you all hear me? Testing?
Yes. Yes.
Hello, my name is Jan Victor Andasan, gender pronoun they, them, the Tagalog word siya. I am both a staff and member at Eastern Communities for Environmental Justice, speaking on item 2, the refinery rule. I also have been a long-time resident of the Long Beach Carson community, living right next to the refineries, the 4 refineries in our region. And I'm here to, one, thank staff for the amazing work that we have seen with the rule that has progressed. over the past couple of months. I'm grateful for all the work and labor that both staff and community members have put in, both in work group meetings as well as the public comment periods where many of our youth from ECR were able to share, as well as residents in the Air District. I want to uplift that while it has been great working with staff, it is really unfortunate in the last minute leading up to the last stationary source committee meeting that there was a change. I wasn't able to attend the meeting because I was hit with COVID for the first time, which reminds me of why it is so important that we acknowledge that all emissions have impact and they impact the bodies of people. And I'm naming that because I no longer have COVID, but I'm still, bearing the impacts of what it's like to be immunocompromised. And so the exemption that was added last minute into the refinery rule, I would ask the staff to remove, because we know that all emissions affects our body, both in the short and long term, and that the Air District has the ability to make these rules to protect and make the quality of life of the residents in the district better. And so I do support this rule, but I would ask staff to remove the exemption before December 5th. And so that when we vote on a rule, that we have the strongest rule, and that also it is not delayed, because these rules should have been passed years ago. And so again, please take out the exemption and pass a strong rule and do not delay. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Next speaker is Diego Mayan. Diego, welcome, and please identify which item you're speaking about.
Hello, I'll be speaking on item number 2. My name is Diego Mayan, gender pronouns he, they. I'm an organizer with Healthy Active Streets and a member of ECR Communities for Environmental Justice. I'm in strong support of the fence line monitoring rule. I think it's a really good first step in terms of moving towards zero emission infrastructure, as well as the data will be a very important tool for us to be able to advocate for better air quality in our communities, because historically we've been disproportionately impacted by the impacts of oil production and oil refining. And as my peers mentioned, there was an exemption added at the very last stretch of this process, during this process, AQMD has been doing really decent work in terms of working with the community and ensuring that the rule stays as strong as possible. So I would hate to see that work tarnished and that trust tarnished by once again giving industry a loophole or a more leeway to continue to pollute. Impacted communities have been suffering for too long in horrible air quality for decades on end, and it's about time that we see both justice and improvements for those environmental inequities. So again, I would like to reiterate that I am in support of the rule and would not want to see it amended or pushed back, but I urge the council to remove the exemption before finalizing next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Diego. Our final speaker on the agenda today is Melanie Cohn from Biocom, California. Melanie, go ahead, please, and let us know which item you're testifying on.
Hi, I'm speaking on item 2. I'm Melanie Cohn, again, Senior Director of Regional Policy and Government Affairs with Biocom, California. We're the state association for the life sciences, representing 1,700 members, with about 200 of those in the South Coast AQMD service area. Our members include basic research, biotechnology, medical device, and pharmaceutical companies. These are the companies creating the treatments and devices of today and the cures of tomorrow. We offer high-paying wages for employees of all backgrounds, and our industry held up the economy while working directly on COVID-19 to develop a vaccine. We appreciate South Coast AQMD staff meeting with us to review concerns about this proposal. We do have continued concern with fence line monitoring as a compliance mechanism. There are many outside factors that can impact this technology. Sorry, were you?
I'm sorry, are you speaking on item number 2 or 25?
The fence line monitoring, I thought, was item 2.
Yes, go ahead. We weren't sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. There are many outside factors that can impact this technology, including weather, mobile, and other sources outside of the control of the facility. Because it's not technically accurate, fence line monitoring is not used by any other jurisdiction. If there were a false reading, this could cause delays in access to medical services. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and we hope that staff will continue to work with us.
Thank you, Melanie. That was actually item 25. Okay, Madam Chair.
All right. So we are considering items 1 through 23. Are there any board member comments or motions on
Make a-
these items?
I'd like to make a motion to move the consent items.
Okay, moved in second.
Just one quick comment.
Mhm.
Madam Chair, item number 5, I support 100%. Would just ask in the outreach of item number 5, the program announcement, that we also provide notice to the API Legislative Caucus in California. That's the only, thank you very much.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Do we need a roll call? Or are we going to do voting online? Okay, electronic voting. All right, that item passes with 11 yeses, 2 absent. All right, now we are on item 25, public hearing. This is on proposed amended rule 1405. Do we have a staff presentation?
Good morning. My name is Mike Kraus. I'm an Assistant Deputy Executive Officer in our Planning and Rules Division here at the South Coast AQMD. I'm proud to present to you our proposed amendments for our Rule 1405. This addresses ethylene oxide emissions from sterilization facilities. Next slide, please, Paul. Great. So by way of background, we did adopt this rule as an agency back in 1990 that controls ethylene oxides emissions from sterilization facilities. Just as a reminder, ethylene oxide is a chemical that's used to sterilize, such in the case of removing bacteria from certain pieces of devices or equipment. So for example, you could use it for sterilizing from toothbrushes to medical gloves to vaccine needles to implants in our body. So it's a really effective chemical that's used in those processes. This is also being regulated, by the way, on the state and the federal level. For us here at the AQMD, we did have an investigation. We started seeing some elevated levels around these sources, around these facilities from the fugitive emissions. So we were quite concerned about them and started continuing investigation, which I'll dive into in a few slides here. Next slide, please. Okay, so how does this process sort of work? So it kind of begins on the federal level. The U.S. Drug and Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, establishes protocols by which something is required to go through a sterilization process, and that has a very specific way. So again, depending upon the product, we'll then have to go through a specific protocol for both the sterilization as well as aeration. Aeration is that period of time by which the product is, the ETO is actually being emitted from that product, so we call that off-gassing. But also, we've learned that there's a step called post-aeration. This is just typical after the aeration process. It's being placed into an area to get ready for to be sent off to the clients. And again, we're noticing that there could be potentials for off-gassing during that phase. So we kind of walk you through this process here on this slide. I do want to highlight from the sterilization and the aeration, both those steps are controlled with controlled devices. Post-aeration is not, but we are addressing it, that post-aeration phase in this rule. Next slide, please. Okay, with regards to us here in our region, we do have different sizes of sterilization facilities. These are defined by the amount of ETO that is being permitted at those facilities. So as you see, we've got 7 large, a couple medium, smalls, et cetera. The others are places like universities or hospitals. Some of those are exempt, but I want to highlight here, you're going to see a focus in this presentation on large facilities. And the reason for that is because the large facilities make up 99% of the throughput of ETO in our region. So we really want to, focus in on those regulations. However, having said that, that doesn't exclude the mediums and smalls. We do have requirements for them. Again, control equipment, the amount of control efficiency from that equipment, et cetera. Okay, after all that post-aeration, however, we've also noticed that there's facilities out there, warehouses, that are storing those. So even after post-aeration, they'll sometimes go to a warehouse where they get, again, sort of organized or picked up and sent off to their customers. There has been concern about whether the warehouses are actually also off-gassing and what that amount would be. We know that, of course, it's declining, but it is of something of concern. We did do a sweep, or our monitoring group did a sweep of those warehouses. We only saw one bit of elevated level. It was a very large warehouse, so that kind of made us start thinking about maybe we need to do some more work, and I'll outline what our proposal is in the rule here. Next slide, please. Okay, so why are we concerned about ETO? So ETO again is it's an effective chemical for the medical devices. 50% of the medical devices, as a matter of fact, in the U.S. Are sterilized with ETO. However, it is a known carcinogen, meaning that if you're exposed to it long enough, you have the potential of getting cancer. This also has reproductive harms, and it's also known to affect DNA, so it mutates, and the concern there, of course, is any exposure for someone of a young age, right? Because they're still growing. Again, there's we've noticed those elevated levels. We have our own risk factors currently already. However, the EPA has come out with even higher factors, 30 to 50 times more higher than we previously thought of. So that, of course, enhances our concern, about exposures to ETO. On the state level, they also came out with some updated risk factors that are in a draft form right now, but they are very similar to US EPA's. Next slide, please. Okay, with regards to that investigation I mentioned, this has been ongoing since August 2022. A lot of work's been done at that division. They're very exhausted, I'm sure. They've collected and analyzed over 900 samples at 3 of the large sterilization facilities, 2 of those facilities, as well as the community. 2 of those facilities have fallen in under our Rule 1402. Some of you may know this as Assembly Bill 2588 to do a toxic risk assessment. They were then brought in on what's called an early action reduction plan. These are sort of immediate actions that can be taken at that facility, controls and curtailment provisions. There have been 3 events of curtailment for there, and we just want to note that of any of those 3 curtailment events, none have reported shortages of the products that were being curtailed to be sterilized. But there's also some good news in all of this as well, that of those 2 facilities, and mind you, these elevated levels we were talking about, if I can put it in some kind of context here, is about around 100 or 100 plus 100 ppb, okay? And with the work that they're already doing out there at 2 of those facilities, you can see what those numbers are, 2 to 3 ppb. So even though some of these are not even done with all their controls and installs and what have you, we're already seeing these levels drop dramatically. Next slide, please. Of course, there was a 3rd facility, and I know you guys have seen this slide before. This is at our Carson sterilization facility, again, a large facility that you can see here on the left where those concentration levels are at, those little, what color is that? Anyway, those dots there on the left. Is that gold? Is that ochre? Anyway, and up to like 120, very high levels there. But that company, it's a real success story, right? They did a voluntary shutdown. They put all those controls and permanent total enclosure around the facility. And as you can see there, then after that second line there, after that voluntary shutdown, when they started turning on those devices and monitoring those levels, you can see how low those are. Those are actually looking at less than 1 ppb, a real success story, and what we wanted to emulate within the rule. They are doing those same kind of controls that we are proposing. So that's just wanted to kind of highlight that point. Next slide, please. Okay, so when we're looking at the actual changes to the rule, again, I want to highlight these larger facilities being the fact that they're the ones that, again, are contributing 99% of that ETO throughput. We are looking at enhancing both the fugitive and the stack emissions. So let me just highlight there. So when we talk about stack emissions, again, these processes have controlled devices, and those are being led up into a stack, and therefore we're monitoring those at that level. We are going to be requiring a concentration limit at that stack, as well as a facility-wide limit. So real stringent there. We also provide an option of when you're looking at the controlled device, what goes in, what goes out. Is it reducing what we call the 4 nines, 99.99? The rule previously was 99.9, so it's pushing the envelope even further from the stack emissions. Now, when we talk about fugitives, if you recall, those are the emissions that are occurring when you have openings at the facility, which of course sometimes will occur because they're going to be loading and unloading the products. And we want to make sure that we capture those as much as possible. We're imposing a permanent total enclosure requirement around all of those steps. So the sterilization, the aeration, the post-aeration, capturing all of that in an enclosure. And the way you make sure that that enclosure is really being effective is you have a requirement that what they call the negative pressure. So basically the idea is you're monitoring whether that airflow is going in and not out into the ambient air. So really a critical element, a critical provision in there that we have imposed into the rule. With regards to the monitoring of those, whether that's again like on the stack or on the fugitive level, that process, there is a process that takes place, protocols and certifications of those monitoring systems. We recognize that that's a time that will take time to do that. So in the interim, we're imposing both a mobile monitoring step immediately, pretty much 30 days after this rule adoption, hopefully, and then on to a fence line monitoring up to the point by which the continuous emissions monitoring starts taking place. And then they can stop doing the fence line monitoring. Next slide, please. Okay, so then the question comes, what happens? Okay, so you got all these things in place. And of course, if anything kind of goes out and above and beyond what the rule requires, there's a violation and there's that whole process there, right? And then corrective actions, et cetera, that are being taken place. But what if we find ourselves noticing those quick elevated levels? So this is like beyond you're just going above what those limits are, set in the rule, which is kind of the case of what we just dealt with during our investigative process, right? It was like, whoa, what do we do? Let's put something in place. So the idea here is, and this is not the first time we've imposed these kind of provisions, it's a curtailment. Basically, ceasing some level of production gives you an immediate drop off on those exposures of the toxic air contaminant. And so what we did was we've put in provisions there for these levels of curtailment. Now, if it's a little bit above that threshold, we don't need to shut down the facility completely. It's more of cutting, and you'll see here on the box on the right that during the first set of threshold provisions, there's just a level that you would reduce down your curtailment. Now, if we get this result again, which means the problem hasn't been solved, we need to curtail some more, get those emissions down, move quickly on that process. So you can see there on the right, we did look at that in a phased process as those are being imposed. I just want to note here, though, if you kind of look at those, you go, why are all these different numbers and stuff? Well, we do recognize there's going to be a process by which, again, these facilities are going to need to be installing those controls on there. And we know that those levels aren't going to be where they will end up, right? But when the facility eventually gets all these controls in place and everything's operating properly, again, we're seeking that they're going to be less than 1 ppb. So we just changed what that concern threshold would be. So that's why you see, why we call it initial and why we have one as a final, but the concept is still the same. There has been an issue here raised in curtailment, as you've heard in the past. Folks saying like, we really don't want our medical supplies, however, coming in shortages. I think we're all in agreement. That is absolutely true. This, of course, should not take away from the fact that facilities should be good players. They should be operating their facilities appropriately. But having said that, we do recognize that there could be a situation by which they didn't mean to, maybe, I don't know, but find themselves where they would be subject to a curtailment provision, but they happen to be sterilizing a product that is a shortage, all right, or they believe it will be coming up as in being a short supply. So we don't want that to happen. So we've created some safeguards in the rule to allow a determination, whether that's on the federal level, the state level, public health agencies. We've added in California hospitals, medical centers, lots of opportunities by which a facility can alert us and those agencies can alert us that there is a concern about these particular products and to not put them under the curtailment provision. Now, having said that, just remember that they're still held to all the other requirements of the rule. Right? So they're still going to be held to having the controls. They're going to be still held to like having PTE. They're still going to be held to like meeting those limits. It's just, we're merely talking about curtailing production. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a little overview here. We hope it's not too confusing here. But basically the point is we're just trying to make, as I mentioned before now that looks like yellow to me. Before the SEMS gets fully in place and functioning, we do have these interim phases of both the mobile and the fence side monitoring. I do want to highlight the asterisk, however, because it was noted to us just yesterday that the rule does allow for an advanced approval of that SEMS. It's not a fixed, we didn't want to just necessarily have a fixed date. We originally had the fixed date, but we wanted to give flexibility. Our source test team is working hard on the protocols so we can get these continuous emissions monitors certified as early as possible. And if that's the case, and the facility is able to take advantage of that, they will also be able to take advantage at some point in stopping the fence line. Now you're going to see the number, the day 60 are floating around there. That's just that overlap time period, right? By which the facilities are working with the continuous emissions monitoring, but still has some of the fence line just to do that check that everything is working and in place, and then can again not require that fence line monitoring to continue. And at the bottom there in the purple shades, we've got again those trigger thresholds. So I think this is a little more obvious if I confused anybody earlier about those different levels of those. So again, while things are being put into place, we have a threshold, and then when things are in place and properly operating, we have a different threshold. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, with regards to warehouses. So again, as I noted, some early monitoring of those did not seem to, highlight a concern, but the stakeholders were definitely concerned themselves, and they were, they did have questions about those. And what's the best way to handle that? Get data, right? Go out there and learn more about what we're actually seeing out there in those warehouses. So we want to collect the information in the warehouses. Right now, we're going to be focusing on the large warehouses, and for so as you can see here, we kind of laid it out here at the bottom there. So for the larger facilities, greater than 250,000 square foot warehouse, as you can imagine, the larger the warehouse, the more products you can have in there, more sterilized products that is, and the more potential for that, residual off-gassing. So we will be doing a one-year study of that. The facility does have the ability to demonstrate to us that they have very low emissions we're using the same exemption that's currently in the rule at 4 pounds per year. They have the ability to do that to get them out of doing that fence line monitoring. Otherwise, they do the fence line monitoring so we can collect that data. For the other facilities, we're asking them to report what kind of the number of products that they have and things like that, and we can kind of again get a better picture of those warehouses. So next slide, please. Okay, so some of these issues that have been raised, we've heard, and I'm sure you've seen some in the comment letters there, that folks have mentioned, quote unquote, the fence line air monitoring is unreliable. We would agree to disagree on that. As you imagine, our monitoring team has had not only years of working in this field, but just even more recently, obviously, a more aggressive investigation process. As I noted before, 900 samples have been taken, collected at 11 different sampling sites. You've seen those results already. Those are all online, and that's what we're getting. We do want to highlight, if the concern is more about whether the fence line is going to be happening in perpetuity. Again, want to highlight this is a temporary process until we get those continuous emission monitors in place. And to remind you, the condition, we really support that continuous emissions monitoring because it's right there at the stack. It's right there at the front line before it would even get to a fence line. So we really think that is the best monitoring system in place. Okay, so and again, what I highlight with that the Carson facility is that once these emission controls are put in place, that we're not seeing them even getting near to those curtailment levels, and we haven't had any of the curtailment since. And then finally, I think there was an issue raised on what if during that fence line period, what if there's something that gets caught up in those elevated levels that wasn't coming from that facility? And the rule does allow those facilities to demonstrate to us where those other sources might be. So in the case of a curtailment, for example, if that happened to be there, we would look at that, do that in proper investigation before anything gets implemented. Okay, next slide, please. There was a question about background. So I know that's been a concern. So we felt it was really important to highlight to you about that too. So we're all on the same page. So on the right chart there, you can see some of the numbers that we've received as far as LA, Rebido, or is it Rebido? Anyway, I don't know. Though, and you can see they're quite low there as those numbers. We're talking 0.17. So barely, as I would say, kind of a blip on the map there. As you could see, that curtailment level that folks are concerned about is way on up there at 3. So you could see that the background isn't really, at play there. But we do understand that there's concern. What is that background, et cetera? There are investigations going on the federal level to learn more about where that is coming from. Next slide, please. With regards to supply, I've repeated this already, but again, we just want to make sure that we all recognize that the rule is addressing these concerns that people would have with the shortages of the medical supplies. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we have those off ramps already provided in the rule so far. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, with regards to PTs, this is more of a recent issue that was raised about the averaging time. So I hope I'm not going to lose people here. All right, so what we do is we have limits, right? But you have to put the limits. One would say, what's the duration, right? So you're counting all of these data points, right? And if you're going to set a limit, is that based on what kind of time frame? So the rule had every 15 minutes. So basically the monitors are picking up data points at every minute, and then we average those out, and then that's the number that we use to compare to whether you were meeting the limit set in the rule. What was raised to us by a facility was the concern that 15 minutes is a really tight window. When it comes to looking at the negative pressure, that requirement that we have on the PTE, the permanent total enclosure. It's a really important measurement. It really does make and ensure that permanent total enclosure is actually functioning at the level we need it to be. We were requested to give that a little bit more of a wiggle room there, as they recognize that the data that they're looking at, they need that as they kind of continue with their normal operation. So we did feel that we weren't losing much on the integrity of the rule and the integrity of that measurement by allowing a little bit of a compliance margin, as we would call it, for a 1 hour averaging. But the other issue that was raised, though, in some of the earlier data points was, and it happened to be recently, we all experienced the Santa Ana winds. And their particular type of PTE is one that basically has an potential exposure to the ambient air. It's not like within the facility. It's basically the facility, right? So there was concerns about that. If you had these high wind exposure, we recognized that, we looked at that data, and we felt that we could put a provision in there for those extreme high wind events, and it's short periods of time that would make them exceed that, that negative pressure requirement. But again, we didn't feel that, and we have other exemptions and other rules when it comes to high wind events. We do recognize that could be a reality. And so we're looking to just sort of allow the exclusion of those just during those points. So we put a threshold there at 20 miles per hour. Okay, next slide, please. We have gone through an extensive public process, as you know, and you've been on the journey with us. Multiple meetings with our stakeholders, 8 working group meetings, 5 state resource committees. Sorry, Chair McKellen. 5 versions of the rule language released. Next slide. On the socioeconomic side, it's gonna be costly for the facilities to do this, but got to pay to play, and we definitely think that this is obviously worth the money being spent. It's protecting those communities and ourselves. Okay, and then as you can see there, as you probably read already in the socioeconomic report, as always, it projects basically the cost of those things and looks at things like future job losses foregone and what have you, what that comparative value would be. However, having said that, it's also a very low percentage when you think of our large region and what we're talking about when we're addressing annual jobs. So I won't even go into those digits. All right, next slide, please. On the CEQA side, they did look into what the construction is at those facilities. And of course, they look at the time periods by which, that could take place. And they do that calculation. They determined it would be minimal for those, or at least something that would not trigger our significant impacts from this project. And so therefore, we'll be issuing a notice of exemption under CEQA. Next slide. So we're here to ask for approval of our staff recommendation to determine that this project is exempt from CEQA and to amend Rule 1405. And I'm here to take any questions.
Thank you so much. Board member questions. Supervisor Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of ones on the practicality of the process here. You say when you have provisions for in medical emergency to where they need like daily output. I get a little bit nervous when you say we have to go through the state or through the feds to get some kind of process, because everything we do takes so long. So how's that address emergency? If something's like needed concurrently or they have a supply for the next week, what's the simplicity version of that? What you're thinking, what's your process on that?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So, yeah, so we did try to create as much flexibility in that provision. For example, the facility can email us. Typically, just so you know, they when the federal government, for example, they continuously have actually shortages lists. It's an online, it's online. It's just online. And when you look at it, it has like the product, it has like how long they think the shortage will last, and things like that. If they just alert us to that, that could be just as quick. So yeah, it can be very quick. You know.
So you think you could do a turnaround the same day, the
Sure.
next week, that sort of thing, Wayne? You feel confident in that? Okay, and then I'm going back to the costs a little bit. Is it the millions of dollars to set up?
Well, every facility is going to be different because the facilities, you know, some facilities already have PTE, some have not. So yeah, it just varies. But yeah, they're in for a totality when we're talking about all of the 7, 10, 12, 15 facilities. For all of them, it's a little over 4 million, but that's in total.
And I'm just curious, it's very few facilities, and obviously it's more of a warehouse type of setting for the most part, and smaller, large one, not a warehouse, but inside of 4 walls. It's not especially building that probably they can move their equipment to. I'm just wondering, have they talked to them at all about them moving just outside our district and going up to the high desert, my county somewhere, and doing the same facility and not having the same rules? I get EPA's working on a set of rules too, but ours exceed that to a certain point. Is my understanding correct on that?
Well, I wouldn't say we have those conversations to encourage them to move. We do want to support our businesses.
Don't think they're I'm just saying, do you think if the cost gets too much, the practicality of it is that we just basically move these businesses outside our air region, and now we're trucking the supplies back in? I don't know.
Well, all I can say is, again, going back to that Carson facility, here's an example of a facility that has obviously decided to stay here in the district and invest locally and has done so.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilmember Vice Chair Cacciatti.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike, this is regarding fence line monitoring, a couple of the slides. And this is when elevated levels are determined at the fence line monitoring, but for some reason not inside the facility, the stacks, et cetera. If you can just go through the process, maybe for me and board, how does a facility demonstrate that the elevated level that's showing at the fence line monitor, but not inside the facility, is not a result of the facility, but maybe, so when Larry and I, Mayor McCallum, went out to Steris, and there was a device a gentleman had. I don't know what type of device it was. It was for testing, and I'm not sure it was accurate or not, but they put it up to a car exhaust, and it went off elevated level. So how, again, if a facility, they're really trying to, they're standard in the industry, they're clean, but something happens outside and they say, wait, Mike, this isn't us. There's something going on outside. There's wind, or there's trucks going by, or what's the process for demonstrating, just so we're fair to everybody?
So Vice Chair, let me take an initial attempt at that and then have Dr. Lowe add some additional information. So part of what we've been doing for the last 2 years is doing extensive monitoring around these facilities. And each of these facilities that Mike had showed, in particular, Parter, Sterigenics in Vernon, Sterigenics in Ontario, we set up monitors around the facility. One of the first things that we're looking at, upwind conditions. And so we have a very good sense of if something's coming from an upwind, that it's not from the facility. If something's coming from downwind, or it's coming from other sensors, those are all part of the information that we look at, but it's a whole set of information that we look at. What are the operations? What if the facility isn't even in operations and we're getting hits? We did have, as I believe, and Dr. Lowe can elaborate, on the Carson facility, we had certain instances where the data indicated that it wasn't the facility. So Dr. Lowe.
Thank you, Wayne, and good morning, board. Jason Lowe, Deputy Executive Officer, Monitoring Analysis. So as Wayne had mentioned, we've used a similar process in orders of abatement process when we were in Paramount, using air monitoring data to evaluate curtailment provisions. And there is that process where we look at air monitoring data. And we do look at the totality of not just air monitoring data, but other information that's available. So, for example, as Wayne had mentioned, we look at upwind, downwind. and look at other provisions such as, for one instance, like in Paramount, there was elevated levels at both upwind and downwind. We knew there was some activity that was producing potentially hexavalent chromium upwind of that entire region, and because we saw it in other monitors as well. So when doing the evaluation, the evidence can be brought before technical and as well as other team members here at South Coast AQMD to review that information very thoroughly to make the best determination and evaluate whether that facility goes in curtailment or not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Mitchell.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. As a sitting member of the committee that heard this issue 5 times, I also would like to say today I'm ready to vote, although I've been ready to vote for quite some time, for a variety of reasons. I am clear that the function and role of this body is to protect the community, from toxic substances. That's primary. And I appreciate that while doing it, that we don't want to complicate industry's ability to do their business. So it's a balancing act. But I think a number of concessions have been offered, colleagues, a number of them. And now that we've got put into place the fail-safe option with regard to lifting curtailment if there's any sign of shortage, I think we offered a concession in terms of average wind speed. I believe we've offered a number of concessions. I think it's really important that this not be delayed. Go Carson. We have examples of facilities that were able to step up to the plate and get it done safely and appropriately. So I look forward to supporting the staff's plan today. I think it's time. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Rahman.
I just wanted to echo Supervisor Mitchell's statements on this. I think we've been working on this for quite a long time. I know our team has been talking also to some of the initial critics of the rule. And what we've been hearing is that staff has been working very, very diligently to address their concerns. And my understanding is that the vast majority of those concerns have been addressed in this version of the rule. So I want to thank staff for their diligence and for their willingness to continue engagement with industry representatives. And my hope is that we can pass this today. So thank you all.
Okay. I don't see any other board member requests to speak, so I'm going to open the public hearing. We don't have any speakers here signed up, but this is a public hearing, so anybody who wishes to speak will have their ability to speak. We'll start online, and I'll turn it over to the vice chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our first speaker is Joe Howard. Joe, go ahead, please. You've got 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. My name is Joe Power. I'm a consultant with Sterigenics. We've been actively working with staff over Rule 1405 since they've started. We've done hundreds of hours of analysis, modeling, and synthesis to look at the rule and share our information with the staff. I want to thank the staff who have been very professional, taking a lot of perspectives into account, ours and others. There are still 2 critical issues that we're concerned about. The first one is that we appreciate the high wind exemption, but given the enclosures that, as Mr. Kraus mentioned, are basically the entire building, the winds can have a huge impact. The district has a 20-mile-per-hour exemption in the rule for the differential pressure requirement. We don't think that will work for us when we request that the governing board modify that to be 15 miles an hour for the exemption in section U14. During high wind conditions, even if there are some emissions, the impacts will be very low because those emissions will be carried away very rapidly. Second, we very much appreciate the change to a 1-hour averaging time. We're still not sure we can meet that. but we very much appreciate that. We had asked for 3, but 1 is certainly a dramatic improvement over the 15. We've provided data to the district showing our concentrations at different levels, or our differential pressures at different levels. The system is actually is already operating. It's not the full PTE yet, but the air evacuation systems.
Thank you. Next speaker is Kevin Wagner. Kevin, go ahead. Kevin, you're on mute.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, governing board members. My name is Kevin Wagner. I'm Vice President Global EH&S at Sterigenics. My colleagues and I, along with Ramble, have been actively engaged in the proposed amended Rule 1405 rulemaking, including our participation in working group meetings, submitting comments, communicating with district staff, and we appreciate that the district has considered our comments, along with the many other perspectives that they have to consider in this whole process. And I could say that they've acted professionally throughout the whole ordeal, and we appreciate that. The current draft of the proposed Rule 1405 reflects many changes, but there's still 2 provisions that pose a significant compliance hurdle for Sterigenics' 3 facilities in the district, and you heard that from Joe Howard as well. In short, we're concerned about compliance with the negative pressure requirements, particularly during wind events under the current proposed 1 hour and 20-mile-an-hour wind threshold. The systems that we have installed in our Vernon facilities are robust, but with existing facilities, particularly in Vernon, we have space constraints at the site and within the building. We're limited with the amount of makeup and exhaust air that we can move through the facility to create a deep negative pressure that's required and keep EO concentrations inside the facility safe for our workers. This is because the available space cannot accommodate additional emission control equipment such as dry beds or other associated infrastructure. We request that the board modify the wind speed threshold from 20 miles an hour to 15 miles an hour in section U14. We also request that the board recognize our concerns with the 1 hour averaging period in section K1. These 3 facilities comprise 70% of the medical device sterilization capacity in the district, and the rule modification from 20 to 15 miles an hour will allow our critical medical sterilization facilities to continue to operate safely in compliance with Rule 1405. And I thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Kevin. Next speaker is Chris Chavez. Chris, welcome.
Yes, thank you, board members. This is Chris Chavez with Coalition for Clean Air. We support proposed amended Rule 1405 and urge the district to keep the fence line monitoring provisions. I want to thank Supervisor Mitchell for her comments on this matter just now. I think it's right to recognize where industry has stepped up to the plate and preemptively installed strong control measures. We also want to thank the staff for their hard work on this rule. The rule has been in development for over a year and a half and has been subject to a very robust public process. The risks and dangers of ethylene oxide are well known. We know that there are residential areas, schools, and parks near ETO facilities. The fact is, dangerously elevated levels of ETO have been detected at the fence line of sterilization facilities. That is unacceptable, and the risk for such a situation remains that the risk for such a situation remains needs to be addressed. While it's important to note that health and community advocates have been pushing for a stronger rule, we do believe that this rule is a step in the right direction. I'd also urge both AQMD as well as the industry to continually look for alternatives to ETO and things that are of less risk to the community, to continually look for opportunities to improve the technology that we use to sterilize this equipment. Thank you for your time.
Chris, thank you so much. I'm going to just get a notice to the public. We'll be closing public comment after Jane Williams speaks. So if you want to testify in this matter, now's your opportunity to raise your hand. You have 2 minutes. We'll be closing it, public comment on this item at the conclusion of Jane Williams' testimony. Jane, go ahead, please.
Thank you, board members. This rule has been long fought. I am Jane Williams. I'm the Executive Director of California Communities Against Toxics, and I want to thank the staff, the executive officers, and the board members for hanging in here on this rule. We support the rule in its current form. Ethylene oxide is a very powerful carcinogen. We are now regulating ethylene oxide in the parts per trillion range. It is now the most toxic compound besides dioxin that we regulate within our air toxic hotspots program. The large sterilizers, which are 99% of known use in our basin, are the only known ethylene oxide hotspots in the South Coast Basin at this time. So we must pass this rule and keep robust monitoring requirements in place. The curtailment events that have occurred have not led to supply chain interruptions. So the enhancements in the rule that were granted to industry, we think will handle any supply chain problems that we might have. We are still very concerned about emissions from the warehouses. A study by Rambo at Sterigenics facility in Georgia indicates that warehouses can emit as much ethylene oxide as a sterilization facility itself. So South Coast will need to consider controlling warehouse emissions down the road. We also want to point out that alternatives to the use of ethylene oxide have been approved by the International Standards Organization. And just as we banned the use of perchloroethylene in dry cleaners in the South Coast Basin and switched that industry to safer alternatives, we will need to start thinking very clearly about doing this for our sterilizers. And the reason is because the curtailments are in the part 3 part per billion range, but the risks from ethylene oxide are measured in the part per trillion range. As well, there's impacts on workers that are going to be very difficult to control, which I know that's not South Coast job, but it's something that we should think about. Thank you so much for the opportunity to.
Jane, thank you for testifying. That's the conclusion of your testimony. We'll cut off public comment now on item number 25. We'll proceed with Sam Chung. Sam, go ahead, please.
Hi, Sam Chung with California Life Sciences. First, wanted to start by thanking AQMD staff and board members for an amazing and robust public process. We're very grateful, and it's not lost on us, the multiple extensions that have been provided. But I do think allowing that additional time really did help us to get clarification and to make some adjustments to the rule that I think is good for all sides. So very thankful for that. We appreciate the staff being very transparent, putting out a staff report and going line by line, addressing all the concerns brought by all stakeholders. So kudos to the board and the staff for continuing to meet with us and having an open door or virtual open door policy for us. And I'm sure you guys are pretty tired of seeing us and meeting with us, but I think that's an indication of the process working as intended. When we engage in this process, our primary goal is to make sure medical devices are readily available for the benefit of patients. And so we want to make sure that as the rule is implemented, that it's implemented with as much flexibility as possible so medical device sterilizers aren't forced into needless shutdowns or major disruptions in the supply of medical devices, which we believe is the biggest danger with this rule. So we urge the board and regulatory staff to take into consideration the potential major risks to patients and urge appropriate flexibility to mitigate this possibility. So thank you again for allowing us to comment.
Thanks, Sam. Next speaker is Darby Gottlieb. Darby, go ahead, please.
Hi, Darby Gottlieb with AdvaMed. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. First, I do want to acknowledge AQMD staff for their effort throughout this process. In the last few months, they've made themselves available to us, our members, and other stakeholders to incorporate meaningful changes to help prevent disruptions to patient access to medical technology as a result of this rule. In addition to our efforts, I want to briefly mention the diverse group of stakeholders, hospitals, businesses, individual physicians, and most importantly, patients, who continue to be concerned with the rule and urge the board to consider the impact on patient access as you adopt the regulation. Our primary concern has been and continues to be the use of fence line monitoring for compliance and enforcement. We said this many times before, but the technology is unreliable. It's easily manipulated by outside sources that are outside of a facility's control. High readings could be due to a number of factors like car engines, cigarette smoke, a change in weather patterns, something that Vice Chair Cacciati mentioned seeing firsthand at one of our facilities. Holding facilities accountable for the emissions they are not the cause of and have no control over is inappropriate and frankly doesn't address the problem. No other jurisdiction uses fence line monitoring for enforcement. For many, it's because of these exact reasons. We presented straightforward solutions to help alleviate the supply chain disruptions and the concerns with the compliance timeline, given the critical nature of the operations of medical device sterilizers. We're disappointed that even though staff acknowledges our concerns are likely the reality, the changes to grant additional flexibility in straightforward circumstances will not be incorporated in the final rule, as the goal is to finalize it today. Unnecessarily rushing this rule forward for the sake of being first will only negatively impact patients. We encourage the board to continue to track this issue for unintended consequences that could come, but truly hope that our concerns with the supply chain disruptions and patients' access to critical medical care are not realized. Thank you for the opportunity to weigh in.
Thank you, Darby. Next is Mark Abramowitz. Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mark Abramowitz. I'm with Community Environmental Services, and I participated in the working group on this meeting. I support what's being proposed today. I think staff did a really great job on this. I just want to support what Jane Williams said earlier, and I'm not going to repeat what she said, but I'd like to make just a few extra points. First, the rule needs to be kept intact as a whole and as a package. It truly makes sense. You should also recognize that any time that averaging time for a rule or for compliance is increased, that's actually a weakening of the rule, a loosening of the standard. In this case, it may be fine, and we can reevaluate that sometime in the future. The monitoring requirements are a key portion of this rule, and that with those numbers, along with the districts and proper analysis of those results, can prove an important tool for reducing community exposures. Lastly, I really like that staff has moved towards monitoring, collecting data on warehouses, and I'd like to see that monitoring expanded in the future and moving toward regulating in a way that makes sense based upon the data that's ultimately collected. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. And our final speaker is Felipe Aguirre. Felipe, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Felipe Aguirre, and I live and work here in the city of Maywood. And we have as our neighbor 2 sterilizer plants called Sterigenics in the city of Vernon. And these plants are located 900 feet from Maywood Elementary School. I want to say that we support the adoption of this rule that's up before the board today. And we ask that you do additional testing and controlling of the warehouses, and that you adopt fence line monitoring not only at the site of Sterigenics, but also at the warehouses that need to be regulated also. And we think that this is an important step, because our community is deeply affected, not only by this company, but by many, many companies, as Exide, many companies that are located within the city of Vernon. So that's my comment for today. Support adoption of 1405.
Thank you, Felipe. I turn it over to the chair.
Okay, well, I'll close the public hearing with that, and Mayor McCallum has asked to speak.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This rule has taken a lot of our time, as witnessed by the 5 stationary source committee meetings that we've had. And I want to congratulate and thank staff for their hard work in working with the stakeholders on this. I know initially I had some concerns that we weren't communicating well, and you stepped up and you did that. And that resulted in the 5 meetings that we had. Wayne, I know you and I talked yesterday with your staff about this issue and some of the data that was presented day before yesterday or even yesterday concerning wind speeds, et cetera. Could you address that?
Sure. I'm actually going to have Jason Aspel, our deputy for engineering and permitting, address that. But the big picture is that I think, to your point, Mayor, we were asked to consider a change, and we asked for the data that would substantiate such a change. And we said that if you get us that data, we will look at it. We received data, I want to say it was either Monday or Tuesday evening. It might have been Wednesday. It's all a blur. But Jason had a chance to look at the data along with the rest of our staff. And I'm going to let Jason talk about that data, specifically how it related to substantiating the basis for a request for reducing the wind speed from 20 to 15 and why we took the position that we did. So Jason.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Mayor McAllen. We have been working a lot with the Vernon facility over their pressure readings lately. The allowance we're talking about in this rule is for high wind events. There is a phenomenon as wind impacts these pressure monitors that as the air flows over it, you do get lower pressure on the outside. So some of the readings may fluctuate a little bit. But these are during high wind events. I think some of the concern that comes with a request for 15 miles per hour is that equates to about 5% of the time in the LA basin. So that further goes to about 1 hour a day on average that the facility is asking for an exemption from permanent total enclosure requirements. So in developing this, we felt it was very fair. We have experience with lots of permanent total enclosures in this basin, over 60. Geographically, we have one across the LA River with the Exide cleanup. And also Parter has been doing this as well without needing the allowance. However, we recognize there is that phenomenon. We do make that allowance, but at 20 miles per hour, we've seen provides the appropriate allowance for that.
Do you have any other comments relative to the industry's concerns?
So we heard a little bit about the 3-hour averaging request. I think it's important to recognize that when you look at PTEs in our existing rules, they're 15 minutes. And I think it's important to also acknowledge that when we originally were looking at developing the rule, we were looking at a much tighter standard. One of the facilities, the one that we're talking about, actually submitted a written request for 15 minutes. And that's where we had moved originally to the 15 minutes. And subsequent to that, and I'll say it was right before Thanksgiving, literally the night before Thanksgiving, there was a request for a longer period. We felt that the 1 hour would address those concerns in addition to establishing the wind speed exemption at 20 miles per hour. So when we had a chance to look at the data that you had mentioned earlier, the data didn't support lowering the wind speed, and the data certainly doesn't support the averaging time in terms of what we're looking at. What it really would have done is provided additional leeway, additional wiggle room, whatever it is that you'd like to call it. But the fact of the matter is we felt that it was stringent where we were establishing it. We felt that there was enough opportunity. And more importantly, some of the questions that have been raised with regards to availability and product. There have been facilities that have been operating under conditions that they've actually improved their operations. We haven't had a curtailment in months. And those facilities that have been operating in those conditions haven't even installed the permanent total enclosures yet. So once those permanent total enclosures are installed, we expect to see even better results. And the point that we wanted to make was if we hadn't seen curtailment in the last several months without even having the full extent of the control equipment installed, we felt that was a pretty good indicator that they could move forward in confidence that they'd be able to do that. But in the analysis of the data, Jason and his team noticed that there was actual diurnal differences. So we were seeing greater impacts at night. And again, due to the experience of staff, we were able to say that you need to look at your night operations and tighten up their training, because we'd seen in other facilities that once they had their training implemented and carried out, you could keep those pressure reductions low. So we're providing consulting services. We're actually helping them as they move forward. And I think the staff has done an amazing job in being responsive, even up to the last minute of addressing those concerns that they brought to us.
And I thank you for that. I've spent a lot of time on this rule as chair of the Stationary Source Committee, and we've come a long way from where we first started. And I think we've come to a point where we've got a rule that industry can comply with, and to provide the emission reductions that we need. So I urge my colleagues to support the rule.
Is that a motion?
I'll move approval of.
Mitchell,
A
second.
Mine was louder. I'm just kidding. Supervisor's fine.
All right. Thank you for that. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you. Just for clarification, regarding the fence line monitoring and removing that, can you clarify that process as to when that can occur? And I just have another follow-up after that, but go ahead.
Well, it can occur once the continuous emission monitor is placed in the stack. And I want to make an important distinction that there is a 60-day overlap, and that overlap provides for the fine-tuning, if you will, of the SEMS in relation to the fence line monitoring aspect. You know, we recognize that when you install these systems, you have to have time to tune those. And that's just part of the commissioning process. But the intent was not to have both the SEMS and the fence line. We recognize that that would take time, additional resources. So once the SEMS has been fully commissioned and it's been approved by staff in their review, then they no longer have to do the fence line monitoring. You know, that was one of the concerns. I want to just take a quick look back, make sure that they're all nodding in approval. They are. So yes.
So at the time that they're installed, is there, you said 60-day period before they can be removed, or can they be removed shortly thereafter? Is there a minimum?
It's that 60-day period to demonstrate that the SEMS and the fence line are in alignment, that the system has been proved up. We do not want to remove the fence line without having the confidence that the SEMS is appropriate.
Okay.
But once it's done, they don't have to continue with the fence line once that commissioning process is done and been approved by staff.
And for those that move towards implementing this even before the regulation is in place, would they even have to do fence line monitoring at all if they've already implemented the STEM?
So I'm not aware of any of the SEMs being installed and approved. I'm sorry, Parter, yes. So I'm going to ask Jason elaborate on that.
For any of those overachievers that would go toward, seeing that this is the direction and they're already full speed ahead, they implemented that. Would they even have to do fence line monitoring at all if they are complying with the STEM? And I would, simplicity, thinking that why would you need to do that wouldn't you be exempt if you're already doing the STEM?
Yes. So Parter was the facility, excuse my brain lapse. Parter is the facility that has moved forward, but I don't believe they're fully approved as of yet. And we're the ones that are doing the monitoring. Is that right, Jason? Or Jason Lowe?
Yes. So thank you for the question, Board Member Rodriguez. So I just did want to make a comment with regards to the certification of the SEMS. So as Mike had mentioned, it does take time to formulate this protocol, and for us to have a protocol that's worthy to be considered a certification protocol. So our team is working on priority on that protocol, as well as a few months ago, the board had approved us to get some ethylene oxide monitors, and that's for us to deploy and prove up that technology for the certification. So we are in the process of doing that certification. Once that certification becomes available and the facilities can operate the SEMS in accordance to that certified protocol, then that's when fence line monitoring can then be relieved after 60 days.
And so do you see a scenario where you can implement the STEM without the fence line monitoring? If as far as the sequence of timing of the rule coming into effect, if there were any of the facilities that were already moving on on the STEM process.
So I think the challenge that we have is, I said earlier, we want to make sure that the fence line and the SEMs are validating one another, and that's usually that 60-day process. Your question, though, is don't have any fence line monitoring. You go straight in with the accreditation on the stack monitor.
Have you heard any of those into discussions with the stakeholders about those scenarios occurring? Well, I'm just trying to avoid any redundancy, unnecessary redundancy in the process. If this could be implemented absent doing the fence line monitoring.
Yeah, I think I understand.
While you're waiting to implement, you have fence line monitoring. I understand that's.
Yeah.
And then you're bringing in the stack monitoring and making sure there's alignment. So I understand that, but if there were, do you foresee any scenarios where the stack monitoring could be implemented in a expedited manner by any of the facilities and not have to go with the fence line monitoring?
I don't see that happening right now. In part, as Dr. Lowe mentioned, they're already working on the certification of the SEM stack. Once the rule becomes effective, we're not going to have those SEMs certified immediately. So we are going to have some fence line. I think the question is the duration of that. And what I had understood the issue to be from industry was minimizing the amount of time that those fence lines would be monitored. So once those SEMs are accredited and validated, then that can go away. But I'm not aware of a situation right now where we've got the certification without the fence line monitoring will having to have been done.
Okay, thank you for that. And then on the economic study, there was two data points. It was over 4 million as far as comprehensive amount for compliance, and then there was a number. What was that number of jobs that was highlighted? Was that over 4 dozen, 50 plus? Just can you clarify that again?
54.
Okay, and that's across the 17 facilities?
Yes. Economy-wide. So across the sector, the region.
Okay. So again, thanks to the Stationary Source Committee for your tireless efforts, not once, twice, 3, 4, 5 times. It's almost like a LeBron James type of speech there. So I really appreciate all of the effort and staff, and then also the engagement with the community and the stakeholders to come up and seeing some flexibility and movement on the final rule. So I do appreciate that. I would say great presentation. The idea that it's a pay to play comment, I would be more sober minded in looking at 50 plus jobs, 50 plus families that are going to be without a job. I don't think we look at that in anywhere but a sober view of that, especially in light of, those are nameless and faceless. We don't know them, but that is a unintended consequence. So we're going to go into these rules looking at that as well. And then I think have a heightened sensitivity of that in light of the personal nature of today's comments earlier today about economic reality and dealing with today's economy and wages and being able to have good jobs, et cetera. So again, just an observation as to the unintended consequences of seeing 50 plus jobs lost. But again, thank you for the time and the comments and the consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Solache?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just 2 quick points. One, again, want to express my support to move forward with this. I think we've met enough times as part of the committee. I think we've done a good work, and let's move forward. The second point, I just want to say a big thank you to my colleagues here on this board, because I know that at times we I think we use the word expression recently. We get a little frustrated, or I forget what the other word was recently we've been using. But the point is that thank you, Mr. Seatmate here and there. But here we're dealing with medical devices that we're sterilizing. We're not dealing with just any I mean, these are medical devices. I'm sensitive to folks that are in hospitals, and I'm sure we all are, of course. But I want to make sure that, the fact that we did delay it, all right, not to affect community anymore, but to have a solution that was going to work for everyone. Again, we're dealing with medical devices and sterilizing these more very important tools for our hospitals and clinics. And so I just want to say thank you to my colleagues for allowing us to delay it with the purpose of coming to a solution that was going to be a win-win for everyone. But again, I think we've delayed it enough, and I think we need to move forward and support this. And I'm ready to vote. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Supervisor Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to give my compliments too. If you have both sides testimony that either one likes it, it's not strong enough, it's not weak enough, that means you did a pretty good job at it. And one of the things that, since we're doing like the premier front-end work, and it's kind of like back in my days in the legislature, I think we all remember that sometimes you build laws that weren't thought out completely, but you make them, you make your law, you make now, in this case, a rule. What I'm wondering more generically, Wayne, what's the process 6 months, a year out from here when we review it? Is there a chance for the industry to come back and say, hey, that 15 to 20 mile didn't make a difference, or it does make a difference? Do you have that flexibility internally? Do we have a process for all our rules? Really, that's my one bad side. I would say at the legislature, we never really looked backwards to see how they stacked up and affected other things later. But I'd love to know just the generic process of that. Is there ability for staff to come back to us later, working with the industries that we work with, and say, hey, we found out these tweaks happened, or this new technology came into place, or something, without going through a 5-year, 10-year process?
I think that's an excellent comment, given what we heard about furnaces today. And that was one of our worries when implementing, first of its kind rules. I think that's great. How can we reassess implementation?
So we can report back at the end of the year on the progress that's been made, what are the findings, and make any recommendation. The challenge that we have, I don't want to turn it into a 10-year, but it might be a 2-year. And the only reason I say that is because generally when we look at the rulemaking calendar, we can only work on rules that are on the calendar. So maybe there's a way that we can just leave this on the calendar under a TBD or something like that.
So again, I'm fairly new to this, but we used to have sunset things written into the certain legislation, so we had to look at it. When we heard the testimony today, and I've heard this before I came on the board about the stuff on the higher elevation not working. If we don't make it practical, you're gonna get a lot of frustration out there. And we want to I rather leave things more broad to allow you and our staff to address those practicalities while still trying to attain the same goal. But if you write it so prescriptive, it has to be this way. And then especially when you deal with newer technology, the technology is changing every 6 months. And even as the reading material. So how do we give you that power so we're...
Yeah, so I think we do have the authority to do things, right? If something is so wrong as to affect availability, there are mechanisms that we have to address that. There is that flexibility. And I don't believe that we need a sunset provision in it. I think we can commit to providing a report back to the board on the actual implementation over the course of the year. And as I said before, and if we leave the rule on the calendar, then if something does come up, that would give us an opportunity within that year, once we make that report, to bring any recommendations back to the board. Excuse me. Yeah. So the point being is that we would have to put it on the calendar. If we're going to report back next year in December, we could have enough time for 25 to address it. So we could do it after the year, and we have a catch-all on the rulemaking calendar as well. So I don't think we need any additional modifications or changes. And I'm just making the commitment that we'll report back on the progress in 1 year.
No, I think that's good, Madam Chair. If there's something on one of these newer cutting edge stuff, and especially where we're using newer equipment or new manufacturers that we test on a limited basis, now they go to production wide like the furnaces. I think it's just a general good practice to kind of review it a year, 18 months down the road to make sure that we're achieving what we wanted to achieve and there's no loopholes and there's not other things to be addressed on the technology side. So if something that maybe you come back to us at a later time and figure out a process for that. I'm very supportive of this process so far, but it's also brand new. So I don't know that there is a big difference between 15 and 20 miles per hour at this point and things until you actually put it in effect, for a year in multiple different locations. I know my Inland Empire gets a lot of heavier Santa Ana than probably other places does. And so I just love to see the data later of how it was implemented and see if it achieved the goals that you wanted to do.
Do you need us to put in the motion that it come back to a committee so it's formal?
Well, I would say that we would report back to Stationary Source Committee on that particular aspect. I don't believe we need to formalize it. This is enough record.
Okay.
But I do want to point out that we in part are driven by the confidence that we have in seeing what's already been accomplished. The Parter facility has been in operation under the newer conditions that we're looking at in rural development for almost a year. So we've got a lot of record, a lot of data on a facility that has done what we're trying to do for everybody. But I'm more than happy to report back, as you suggest, Supervisor, and we would come back to Mayor Callen on the Stationary Source Committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Board Member Padilla Campos.
I did want to just highlight that the board earlier in the meeting approved, I believe it was item 14, which is the rural control forecast for 2024. I'm not sure if the board would want to add this item to that, but since that measure was passed unanimously, any member who voted in favor of that could make a motion to reconsider it and add that.
Personally, I'm comfortable if it goes back to Stationary Source.
Right.
Board Member Padilla Campos.
Thank you. I'm also ready to move forward in passing this motion, but I wanted to comment on a comment you made, Wayne. You said how you are almost giving consulting advice to the businesses, and I just really appreciate that because it shows that we're not just creating rules to create a rule and collect the fines, but we're really working with all parties to ensure that we're protecting the health and also ensuring that industry can do what we're asking of them. So I've worked with a lot of regulating agencies and not all of them do that. It is about the fee. And so I just wanted to react to your comment and really appreciate your entire team in doing the great work that they do. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, board member. I'm sorry. I feel I need to respond. I apologize. Just so that people don't think that technically we're consulting, I just want to convey that we are doing exactly what you said, and that is we're trying to work with all parties. And in large part, everything that we do is so data-driven. And so making sure that we can share and understand the data really helps all of us. And we have such a great and experienced team. You heard earlier about people saying how they're motivated to be here. When people can spend the extra time and do those data analysis and talk to them where they're like, whoa, this isn't just somebody that I can say, well, here it is, and this is the way it is. No, you can't do that with the staff and with the people here at the South Coast, because this group of people will dig deeper than you ever thought possible and really try to help people understand what it is that we're looking at.
I see that and didn't mean to get anybody in trouble with that, but I do appreciate that and see that every time I'm part of and hear the presentations and I'm part of these meetings. So just thank you.
Okay, last comment before we vote. Supervisor Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, I want to say that, yes, I think we came full circle to that it is my experience as a committee member that we often get implementation updates in committee. And on that, I agree with Supervisor Hagman that all of the policies and regulations that we pass should have the opportunity to come back to the kind of committee of origin to hear updates. I would not support a sunset concept, and I don't think that would be in the industry's best interest. What would be their motivation to invest in their companies? Because that's what this is. It's an investment in their companies. It's an investment in the health of their 54 employees and the 900 children at the elementary school in Maywood. If it's a sunset, how do you justify those significant investments if you think the rule is going to come to an end? So I absolutely support making sure that on all of our regulations and rules, for that matter, that committees have the opportunity to weigh in on them. And to just set the record straight, then Assemblymember Hagman knows that on every Mitchell bill that he voted on, that they were completely thought out and strategic and had a look back. So just for the record. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, let's have a roll call or a vote on this. All right, great. That item passes 11 to absent. Thank you all for your hard work on this rule. Bay, take us into closed session.
Yes, Madam Chair. It is necessary for the board to recess to closed session pursuant to Government Code Sections 54956.9A and 54956.9D1 to confer with its counsel regarding pending litigation, which has been initiated formally, into which the South Coast AQMD is a party. The actions are South Coast Air Quality Management District v. EPA, U.S. District Court for the Central District of California, case number 223-CV-02646, and Eastern Communities for Environmental Justice at all South Coast Air Quality Management District, the Governing Board of the South Coast Air Quality Management District, the California Air Resources Board, and those 1 through 25 inclusive, U.S. District Court for the Central District of California, case number 223-CV-6682. It is also necessary to recess to closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6 to confer with labor negotiators, agency designated representative A. John Olvera, Deputy Executive Officer, Administrative and Human Resources, employee organizations, Teamsters Local 911 and South Coast AQMD Professional Employees Association, and unrepresented employees, designated deputies, management, confidential employees.
I can hear you.
A review of any reportable actions taken in closed session will be provided to the clerk of the board. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.